Town Council meeting for Tuesday, September 16th, 2014. And if it feels like we haven't met for a while, it's because we haven't met for a while. I do want to just, before we move any further, I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, but I did want to mention in the aftermath of our earthquake, one of the proudest things that we as a council, and I know our staff was able to do, is take off the notice on the front door that said that due to the fact that this building was no longer seismically safe, enter at your own risk. The fact that we were able to retrofit this facility just a little over 5 months ago means this building is still standing. We were concerned there could have been significant impact to this building and our ability to function. So I just wanted to acknowledge that on behalf of the council and the staff. With that, and hopefully all of you that are here with us today are getting through the aftermath of that quake as positively as possible. Can we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Hall?
Here.
Councilmember Moeller?
Here.
Councilmember Dorenbecker?
Here.
Vice Mayor Chilton?
Here.
Mayor Dunbar?
Here. And I do want to welcome someone else who is here for the very first time officially, our new Deputy Public Works Director, Debbie Height. So welcome. Thank you for being here. With that, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on to adoption of tonight's agenda. Are there any corrections or questions, or is there action on the agenda?
I move that we adopt the agenda.
I'll second.
Moved by Dorenbecker, seconded by Hall. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next up, we have a proclamation this evening, and I'm going to invite our guests to join me at the podium. This is a presentation of a proclamation declaring September 15th through October 15th as Napa County Latino Heritage Month in the town of Downfield. So, Debbie, please. Lupe. Welcome back. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yes. So I'll go ahead and read this to you, Lupe. Why don't you slide over here just on this side of me? So there's plenty of, right there's good. Right there's good. This is a proclamation designating Latino Heritage Month from September 15th through October 15th, 2014. Whereas in 1968, President Lyndon B. Johnson first recognized Hispanic Heritage Week, later expanded under President Reagan to 1 month, and each successive United States president has continued this tradition, including most recently President Barack Obama, who declared September 15th through October 15th to be National Hispanic Heritage Month, and who has called upon the people of our country to observe this month with appropriate respect, ceremonies, and activities. And whereas Napa County has a long history of welcoming immigrants and is home to a growing multi-ethnic and multicultural Latino population, including citizens originating from Mexico, the Caribbean, Central, and South America, all of whom are welcome and very much appreciated. Napa County's Latino population grew by 50% in the past 10 years and now represents over 33% of our citizens, or approximately 47,000 people, and more than 53% of all public school students are Latino. And whereas the Latino population in Napa County, and more specifically in the town of Yountville, has taken on increasing importance and influential roles in our community through a commitment to family, faith, education, hard work, culture, and service. And whereas Yountville benefits from and supports our Latino population, a relationship that creates an enriched, diverse community for all our residents. This multicultural dynamic will continue to provide an inclusive environment in which all of us benefit for years to come. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, John F. Dunbar, Mayor, on behalf of the Yountville Town Council, do hereby proclaim September 15th through October 15th to be Latino Heritage Month in the town of Yountville. So, Lupe, thank you very much for accepting this. Would you like to share a few words.
Oh, yes. Thank you, everyone. I've lived in Yountville, or my family has been here for over 50 years. I just want to say thank you. I went to school here. This used to be our lunchroom, so I really appreciate it, and thank you for recognizing the Latino Heritage Month. Thank you.
Thank you, Lupe.
Hi, and I just want to comment that tonight around the county there are four other council meetings going on that are all having these same proclamations in American Canyon, Napa, Calistoga, actually in here, and then St. Helena will have theirs on the 23rd. And then this morning there was a proclamation also by the county Board of Supervisors. Napa Valley Unified School District made a resolution, and it's on their website. It's on Napa County Office of Education's website. And I think these are all ways that we show respect for our community members whose culture is not not the dominant culture. But that might change because the population is really changing. I sent my parents a note about what I was doing and that I'm involved in this, and it's for the children. And I looked at where I'm from, my hometown, which is Los Angeles County, and the white population in Los Angeles County is 16% of children. The children of color are therefore 84% of the children of Los Angeles County. That's a really dramatic statistic. And I think that here, where our statistic is 53% of our public school children are Latino, it's more around 50% for children in the county overall. That's still a really huge number. And it's important that children know that they can keep their culture and that their culture is valued here. So I invite you to engage with some of the events in this calendar. I can leave some at the table with Samantha, perhaps. The Napa Valley Museum, of note, is going to have an exhibition of Latino artists. It will have its opening night on October 3rd. It'll be a great event. It's a great party. It's $5 to attend. I encourage people to go. Their parties are always wonderful. And then they'll have winemakers, Latino American or Mexican American winemakers on October 4th, and the exhibit will run from October 4th to the end of November. They'll have several free days where people can come on the Saturday. There's no charge, and they have activities for children that are free. So that's something we can feel proud of that's happening right in our town. And I also just want to acknowledge the town for being a host to the Latina Women's Conference of the Napa Valley for the last couple of years, donating your space is my understanding. And I think that's important because we're such an expensive community to live in that we don't have a lot of Latino community members or low-income community members living here, but we have many who are working in this town. And so being a partner to the rest of the valley and sharing our resources in ways that are appropriate that we feel are appropriate for us to do so is a wonderful thing. So thank you again.
Well, thank you both very much. We're going to move ahead to public comment, and this is not your chance to speak on any of the items that are on tonight's agenda. There'll be public testimony during those items. This is if there's an item that's not on tonight's agenda that you would like to bring to the attention of the council. And I know that we do have one guest in the audience who would like to speak to that, so I would invite you now to come up and share your comments. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Father Peter Talcott. I belong to the Diocese of Santa Rosa. I'm here to promote a project that I've always had an interest in, and it's I know that the City of Yountville has not an interest in it because it involves only Caltrans, and that is this from North Napa to Yountville in the median of the freeway, Highway 29. I would like to propose to Caltrans if they would plant for every, say, quarter of a mile a valley oak, and I figured it wouldn't be more than between 10 and 15 trees. It involves, I talked to the man, this is a while back, I talked to the man in charge of Northern California beautification, and he said it would, he talks about budget and all, but he said it's a possible or feasible, but it has to take interest, or it has to be a big interest on the part of people to promote this. And so that's the reason I'm here, is to ask if anybody would be interested in promoting this and going to Caltrans and see what they would, cooperate in doing this. It's mainly just to beautify the freeways. You come out of North Napa and you just sort of see, all of a sudden it's sort of bland there, and it was just to give a little beauty. And these valley oaks, as you know, grow relatively fast. The one real heritage oak is adjacent to the Trefethen Vineyard. And there's only about 2 or 3. Years ago when they put in the freeway, they put, the guardrails around it. And that, I guess, would be an expense. But as far as the trees, you buy them in containers and they're not that expensive. Okay, thank you.
And
wait a minute, excuse me?
Do you happen to have any way for people to get in touch with you if they want to join your effort? Do you have a phone number or an email?
Yeah, phone number is, my name is in the phone book, Talcott. Yeah, my mother's name and my name, yeah. She's deceased now. Oh, I'm going to invite, she's coordinating with me, a friend of mine, Claire Polanski, and she'll say a few words. She's worked with government agencies.
Okay.
Father, did you want to leave your phone number to put on in minutes? Okay, I just wanted to let people know that I have a strong background in this sort of project, working with Caltrans, which can be a very tough thing to do, and you need somebody who knows the ropes of federal agencies. I'm a professional project manager, and I've worked with Caltrans and Department of Defense and Army Corps. So anything that involves environmental assessments, all the things involved in this, I can actually do gratis to make sure the project has support. And so, Father, would you like me to state your phone number for the minute so people can find it? So it's 707-963-2231. 2231. And so in light of the fact that we're also considering the removal of a heritage oak, which is a big deal here, I think it's good time to think the idea of maybe finding a way to contribute back, adding some more oaks back to beautify the gateway to this area. And I just want the public to be aware they have a strong advocate, and I can actually spearhead the project and get it through. All we need is the support. It's not even going to necessarily take very much money. So anyway, but by reaching Father, you can, you'll reach all of us.
Okay.
And
great.
I think that's all I have to say, unless anyone has any questions for me.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks very much for presenting your ideas.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on an item that's not on tonight's agenda? Now would be that time. Yes? I think if it's what we talked about before the meeting, it will be discussed on the agenda. Yeah, one of our items. And I know the irony of the presentation that was just made is not lost on this crowd. We did not plan that. I don't think they did either. Moving forward to the consent calendar, is there action to be had on the consent calendar? Or are there any questions or comments about those items?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
So we're flip-flopping. Hall, seconded by Dornbecker. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. So now we're going to move on. We have no presentations this evening, so we will move on to our first public hearing, which is related to Stuart Sellers Master Development Plan, considering a request for an amendment to that development plan. Sandra.
Good evening. This item is a request to remove the 43-inch Heritage Valley Oak from the Stuart Sellers project, and I'd like to provide a little bit of the history that's occurred since the applicant first came before us in 2010. And in 2010, the applicant presented a concept design for the project site, and with that design, they proposed 2 large structures that would be in and around the area of the oak, and they were requesting approval to remove the heritage oak at that time. With the application, the applicant submitted an arborist report submitted by Rob Gross, and he evaluated the tree and identified there was root loss and decay, and his recommendation was to remove the tree, although he did provide some recommendations for measures that could be taken to prevent further tree decline or root loss, and these included crown clearing, select trimming, and soil replacement. So that concept was heard by the council and feedback was given. The council expressed concern with removal of the tree and expressed a desire to preserve it and that the site be redesigned to accommodate uses in buildings that could jointly use the site with the tree. So the applicant redesigned the project after that, and the new concept was was for 3 smaller buildings that were arranged in a cluster around the oak tree, and the oak tree was retained as a focal point of the project and really a significant site feature. So the applicant next came before the council in 2013 when it sought approval of the master development plan. And at that time, the applicant submitted an arborist report by Bill Pramick, who was the town's consulting arborist at the time. And that report was prepared in 2011. And it included the site evaluation by Mr. Pramick of the buttress roots, the trunk, and the limbs. And he found that there were several defects with the tree, but he concluded that none of these constituted an imminent hazard or a compelling reason to remove the tree. He suggested several mitigation measures that should immediately be taken to reduce the tree's risk and to prevent further decline. And these included pruning the limbs to reduce the weight and the wind sail, to install a 4-piece cable system on the limbs, and to have a follow-up plan for the care of the tree that included an annual inspection, ongoing monitoring, and regular maintenance. He also noted that in the future, the tree may require bolting or support columns in order to stabilize a crack that was in the tree and to support its limbs. Both of these treatments were similar to actions taken for the Villaggio Spa heritage oak, and I'll discuss that a little bit later. To date, none of these recommendations have been implemented by the applicant, and it's unknown whether the current condition of the tree is a result of deterioration that could have been prevented or halted or reversed the tree's decline. However, the applicant does indicate that they did some degree of work, and this includes addressing the ant infestation and moss problems with the tree. So the project was approved in July of 2013 by the town council, and thereafter the applicant submitted the arborist report prepared by Sherby Sanborn and also included with this report. Mr. Sanborn concludes that the tree is at high risk for failure, and he recommends its removal. He does include recommendations for the care and maintenance of the tree in the event that it's retained, and these include increasing the 10-foot buffer around the tree, reducing its risks by installing support columns, again similar to the Villaggio oak, spot oak, and improving the soil conditions. He also suggested some other potential measures such as relocating or removing the cafe building in favor of the tree, or redesigning the foundation for the cafe or bookstore. Both of these are definitely significant measures that would affect the site design and layout overall, and would really change the course of this project should it move forward. So following Mr. Sanborn's report, the applicant submitted building permit drawings in 2014, and these included 28 mitigation measures that were included in a tree protection plan that were included in the building permit set and were ultimately approved with that set when it was approved in June of this year. So earlier this year, we received the application to remove the tree, and the applicant indicates it's for the reason of inability to obtain liability insurance and failure to be able to secure a construction loan. And 2 letters from insurance carriers were submitted with the packet detailing this issue on behalf of the applicant. So at this point, now in 2014, the town retained a 4th arborist report to give an opinion. This time it was through A+, the town's current consulting arborist. And A+ found that the decay and the ant colony were present, and they are recommending removal of the tree, although they are recommending that it be replaced with as large a replacement tree as feasible. So there are a few issues I want to discuss when considering the removal of this tree, and the first relates to the town's policies on the preservation of heritage oaks. And in 2002, the town council adopted the Heritage Tree Survey and Map. At that time, it declared heritage oaks to be of special significance to the town, and it's based partly on these policies that the tree was ultimately incorporated into the project design and made part of the project. The town also has a history with heritage oaks in town and how to deal with them when arborist reports identify significant issues with those trees. And one example is the Bellagio Spa, which received approval in 2006. And that tree had an arborist report that indicated it had a large vertical crack, and that was of some concern, but the project arborist recommended bolting the crack and propping up the limbs, and these were incorporated into the conditions of approval, and they were ultimately implemented. As you look at that tree today, you can see the props. There are quite a few of them supporting those limbs. So it's an example of the measures that can be taken to preserve a heritage oak. We also have the information that we've gathered from the 4 arborist reports. And all 4 arborist reports share information both on the idea of removing the tree, but they also include mitigation measures that can be taken to minimize risk and to halt decay in some of the structural issues. I do note that the Pramick report is the only one to weigh in favor of mitigation over removal. And it brings me to the maintenance effort that's been provided to this tree since the Pramick report in 2011 and the Sanborn report in 2013. And it raises the question of whether lack of action on behalf of the applicant contributed to the current condition of the tree and the risk. It's unknown, but it's definitely an issue out there when we're weighing all the different options for removal of this tree. There's certainly the issue of liability, and the applicant can obtain liability insurance or secure a construction loan. And this is based on an identified risk that's in these 4 staff reports. What this means for the town is if it were to deny the tree, it essentially puts the town on notice that it could face liability if there's a failure of the tree as identified in the reports and it results in injury to life or property. There's the issue of replacement trees, and the Heritage Tree Ordinance allows the town to condition a heritage oak's removal with some sort of replacement. And the Sanborn report recommends 1 or 2 valley oaks as replacements of 60-inch size or greater. The A+ report recommends a 72-inch box valley oak replacement, believing the largest tree as possible is the best for the site. And so there's a difference in cost between the 60-inch and the 72-inch, and also a difference in what you're getting. A 60-inch is about 15 to 20 feet in height, whereas a 72-inch is about 20 to 24 feet in height. And I put this rendering of the project site behind us, and it does show the tree. The tree is probably about 40 to 50 feet in height, so a replacement tree would be much lower. To gauge how tall that really is, both of the 1-story structures on this site, the approved buildings, the cafe and the bookstore, are 20 feet in height, whereas the tasting room is 29 feet in height. The cost difference between the 60-inch and the 72-inch is $4,500 for the smaller tree and approximately $15,000 for the larger tree, so it is a lot more money. So if the town is to approve removal of this tree, staff would recommend the largest replacement tree as possible. We are recommending the 72-inch box, and that's because of the significance of the tree and its impact on the town's urban forest. These old, several hundred-year-old trees have an impact that's positive and hard to replace. When it comes to the number of trees, staff is recommending just one based on size constraints of the property, the number of buildings and parking areas, and what really may be feasible for the site, and in recognition of the fact that when a smaller tree is planted, it will grow up into a large heritage oak someday that needs some space. So there's a quote that I like from the A+ staff report that I'll paraphrase, and it's that essentially there can be no replacement for a tree of this size and age, such as a Stuart tree. We know how large it is. We know that it's a grand old beauty. We know that it has a very positive impact on this town. But against that, we have to weigh the identified impacts and risks that are identified in 4 separate arborist reports, and weigh the consequences if the town were to deny the tree. So we've included a resolution in your packet for approval of the tree removal, subject to replacement with a 72-inch box and a time frame for planting that. Thank you.
Questions about the staff report? None at this time. I'm not seeing any. Let me just double check my notes here.
That's a question.
Vice Mayor?
I got this is for the town attorney. You made the reference that the town would hold some level of liability if we were told that the tree was a threat and then something happens and we didn't allow it to be removed. Can you kind of just expound on what the level of legal liability is on that?
Mayor and members of the town council, if the tree was to remain and unfortunately causes injury or damage, certainly any party who was injured or any property owner that sustained damage could attempt to bring claims against the existing property owner and the town. The town has many immunities or protections because you're making a discretionary determination on what to do. If it's and there's a basis or would be a basis for whatever decision you make this evening. So that doesn't mean that the town would be avoiding litigation, but certainly if it moves down the path of retaining the tree, whatever measures that are going to be taken, the town could point to the conditions or measures that are imposed as the basis for claiming immunities under the government code.
Do you know of situations that are similar like this? I mean, anybody can come and say, hey, there's a danger and try to push off liability. I'm just curious if there are actual situations.
Well, certainly there are situations where to look at something similar would be akin to a street or highway design defect. If someone claims that there was an injury due to possible third-party situations, but in addition they sue the governmental agency because there would be the claim that the design is defective or it was allowed to be defective. Here, I think the argument would be made from a town liability standpoint that the town had evidence in front of it that might lead it to the conclusion that there was potential liability, but still allowed it to remain. Again, to say with a definitive answer that, well, if the tree remains and the town is going to be able to be absolved of any claims against it or held responsible for any claims against it, that you'd have to look at that on a case-by-case basis because the reasons for any injury would also be looked at on a case-by-case basis. We certainly have immunities. As a town, we have protections. Every governmental agency has protections, but that doesn't mean just because they're there that some court of law may determine that the immunities, notwithstanding, the town should be held somewhat culpable.
Thank you.
To that point that the Vice Mayor was inquiring about, I seem to recall that the city of Napa, if I remember correctly, they were not liable for street trees that fell and crushed cars, and it was determined those being on private property, it was the private property owner who was liable. What I don't know is if down the litigation path, if the city had any exposure, or if the difference is being put on notice about the health or the lack of health of the tree.
Right, and again, I don't know the specific circumstances, Mr. Mayor, but it would seem that if there is potential notice or actual notice of a dangerous condition that's allowed to exist, even if it's on private property, and in this situation, the request for removal of that potentially dangerous condition, I'm not making any value judgment on whether this tree is or isn't. I'm just saying in general that certainly then the party injured would then be turning to the governmental agencies saying, well, you had an application before you that could potentially remove a dangerous situation, and that governmental agency did not act to do so. But I can't speak specifically to the Napa situation.
Okay, thanks. The one question I have, Sandra, and do you have a question now?
I just want to follow on this line of discussion with our town attorney. And specifically in one of the Arborist reports, and maybe even more than one, they did point out that probably the greatest threat to the tree are demolition impacts. So what you're saying now is as the tree stands, and even though there are many long lists of mitigation methods to try to prevent the demolition impacts to the tree, I don't really think this is an exact science. I mean, they've been shown to probably help that. So if building were to occur, how would you, you would really have to tease apart whether demolition impacts caused, if the tree fell over, the tree to fall over versus the previous reported hazard in these reports. Would that be correct?
Mr. Mayor, members of the Town Council, that would also be correct.
Okay.
Each party or every party would probably come in and have their expert to try and explain why injury occurred or the tree may have had toppled or branches fell or whatever it may be. But to answer your question directly, the answer is yes, that is correct.
Thanks.
So, Sandra, the question I have relates to the stated lack of maintenance since the 2011 conditions that were established. In any of the expert arborist reports, is there any reference to what damage may have occurred in the last 3 years and an evaluation of would the condition have been significantly different, or is there no way for them to determine that, or did they not even address that?
It hasn't been addressed in any of the 4 reports, although all 4 reports do indicate measures that should be taken to prevent or halt decline of the tree. And I would say the assumption is that if those were taken, maybe the tree wouldn't be in the condition it is now.
But it's not stated that it would be a significant one way or the other in terms of the condition of the tree.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'll open the public hearing portion of this and invite the applicant to start us off. And what we're going to do is we'll allow the applicant to speak. If you have members of your team that are also going to speak, then I'll invite anyone that wants to speak in support of the applicant position. After that happens, I'll invite anyone that's opposed to the applicant's recommendation to speak. And then after all that testimony is taken, the applicant will have an opportunity to rebut any of that testimony. So that's kind of how this will work. So welcome. And
thank you. Thanks for having me, Mayor and council members. My name is James Stuart. I'm representing my family who's here today. My father, Michael, and sister, Caroline. We own and operate Stuart Cellars, and we're here to ask for approval to remove the tree. As you know, there's 3 reports that all say that the tree is at high risk of failure, and our most pressing concern is health and safety of the town's citizens and anybody that comes and visits the town. We think this could be it's a public hazard. We don't want it to fall and hurt anybody or kill anyone, damage anybody's property, including ours. And really the fact that we can't secure a loan on our property because of this tree, because we can't get liability insurance for this. No insurance company is willing to touch our project right now because of the tree. That's kind of a secondary concern. Our most pressing issue is we want to make sure that we're not responsible for, the possible death of anybody that might be under the tree if it fell. There's sort of a long history to this tree. I've heard a lot of questions about whether or not we've taken appropriate measures to take care of the tree. Ever since the first report that we had, it pointed out existing damage. And that damage is basically that the previous tenants or somebody, in its history, cut through the roots on the back of the tree as they were digging a trench to put in utilities for a pallet that's on the property now. So that was an existing damage before we owned the property. And then the damage to the trunk of the tree, where the most recent report is pointing out, ant infestation, that was also prior to us owning the tree. So really our position is that the tree, its health was already in a state of decline due to the previous owners. We have taken some measures. We thought that we had pruned the tree. Sandra had asked us, if we had done that. My father was under the impression that we had. We went back through our records and found that we actually had not. He was mistaken. He thought he had done it, but he had only gotten so far as to remove the moss and take care of an ant infestation problem, which the town report that I just received this last Friday is the first I've been aware that we have an ant problem again. But really, I'm just asking that, we be allowed to remove this tree. We're in full support of replacing it with one. The town's recommendation of size, we're in support of that as well. We've always thought that this tree is basically an organic piece of sculpture. We designed our entire property around it. We really want, and we have a tree protection plan for during demo and construction and afterwards that we were fully prepared to implement. So, really, this is a loss to us as well. I mean, it's a beautiful tree. We don't want to lose it, but we also don't want anybody to die from walking underneath it at the wrong time. So today I also have my other family members, if you want to ask questions of them. I also have Roderick Wiley from Surface Landscaping. They did our landscape design. He would be the one sort of implementing the planting of the tree. And then we have our arborist, Sherby Sanborn, who was recommended to us by Bill Pramick. And he's here to answer any questions. And then we also have our lawyer here if there are any questions for him. And then finally, I was talking to Sherby earlier today, and I was like, could we have done something by using cabling or props or pruning? And he's like, he basically said that with the damage that already existed with the tree, with its roots and the wound on the trunk, none of those measures would have, ultimately, quote unquote, saved the tree. And this, from day one, this has been a tree with a high hazard element to it. So, any questions?
Thank you. Do we have any questions of the applicant? You're not obligated to have other folks make comments. I just wanted to give you that opportunity just in case. And like I said, you'll have a chance to come back up after we have more public testimony.
Sure. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. I do want to, before we go any further, even though some of these may be for or against, recognize some email correspondence. And I do see that Lori Kagwin is here, but I want to reference that she did send in an email to paraphrase, in her opinion, and she's speaking to two different projects here, so I'm going to paraphrase that she believes this tree is healthy and is going to fight to keep them. And the new owner spent a lot of money working to design around and mitigate measures. And let's see, I'm just trying to edit out the part that doesn't apply to this application. Disappointed the planning department is not being tougher on protection of the natural resources and stewardship of the town's pre-existing resolutions. And if I didn't represent you, or if you'd like to add to that, you're certainly welcome to in a moment. Karen Argood Morrissey also sent in an email that she's unable to attend tonight, but she is disappointed that the council is even thinking about cutting this tree down. Again, to paraphrase, they were saved making a mistake several years ago when a great oak due to liability was being considered to be cut down on the Hopper Creek path, and it still stands today, even after the earthquake. So she basically is in opposition to the tree being removed. Also from Carol Fink, she's not able to be here. Concerned with the proposed request to remove the heritage tree from Stuart Sellers property. Please do not allow this to happen. The trees were here long before us and will be here long after we're gone. At an earlier council meeting, the applicant stated he would not remove the trees, and she appreciates our thoughtful consideration to this matter. We also received a letter forwarded by Stephen Love of the California Wildlife Foundation on behalf of Janet Cobb, the executive officer of that foundation, who heard that we were hearing this item tonight, saying it seems that you're far down the road on this item. We will defer to your judgment on this matter. However, they highly recommend that we require 3-to-1 mitigation for the large, generous tree. Their concern is about the wildlife that would be impacted and the length of time it would take for any box tree to compensate for the loss. So that has been presented to the council as well. So with that, I invite anyone that's in support of the applicant's request to remove the tree to come forward at this time. Seeing no others, I'll invite folks that are in opposition of this request. Lori, would you like to come forward?
Sure. Lori Cagwin. I live at 11 Jasmine in Yountville. I've lived here 16 years, and I tend to be involved in any native oaks that are slated for removal. I'm a landscape architect, and I work a lot with planners and developers and arborists and landscape contractors and suppliers. So I've had 36 years of experience dealing with this type of issue. Before I came tonight, I contacted Specialty Oaks out of Lake County. They have field-grown oaks that they sell. I checked on the size of the 72-inch box, and their field-grown oaks are 6-inch caliper, $4,500, 18 to 20 feet tall by 10 to 12 feet. That's comparable to a 72-inch box. So the cost of this tree with installation is probably around $10,000 supplied by them. The biggest tree that they have available is a 10 to 11-inch caliper. It's 30 feet tall by 15 feet wide, $10,000 material cost, and probably $8,000 labor cost. So that's the biggest tree that our area has, which is a lot larger than 72-inch box. When I reviewed this project, I was disturbed that 2 more arborists were brought in after 2 arborists had already been reviewed, and a resolution was made to protect the tree with mitigation measures. I don't know why 2 more arborists were brought in that were anti-saving the tree. This can happen all the time, depending on who's interested in saving the tree. Everyone has varying opinions. I know that Bill Pramick was your town arborist for quite a while, and now you have a new arborist with a different opinion. So it's a little suspect to me that it could change so radically in a year, whether it was taken care of or not. So I request that the town council hold firm to their original project approval and that they respect the heritage oak ordinance. The tree is at least 150 years old and in good health. With proper mitigation measures, it will live for a long time and grace this new project with its dignity, its history, its shade, and its beauty. We do not have a lot of these trees left. They speak to us of our past, and they represent tenacity and strength and the endured longevity. I ask that you hold firm and retain this tree. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments on this item tonight? Rose, come on forward. Welcome.
Hello. My name's Rose Solis, and I'm their neighbor, wishing them the best of luck on their new project. I've watched this tree since I was a child. I used to climb the tree, believe it or not. Not now, but I used to climb it. It's a beautiful tree. I don't think anything's wrong with that tree. As a matter of fact, I think it looks the most beautiful as it ever has. Back in the Vietnam days, somebody tied a yellow ribbon around that tree. I remember that quite well. I'm kind of got mixed feelings, though, being a person that we're in business. And I know I'm probably going to make people angry some, and some people are going to be okay with it. If it interferes in their business and they're honest about it and says, look, it's in my way, because I think anybody could pay anybody to say anything. Money talks, and you know what walks. So if it interferes in their business, then and they are going to plant new trees, great, wonderful. I hate to see the tree go, but that's my own personal thing, you know. And like I said, had they made me just come out and said, it's interfering in our business, it's not going to work, I probably would have had more respect that way. But, you know, bottom line, it's going to be up to you guys. It doesn't really matter what we say. And I just want to wish all you guys good luck on that. So, and also, like I said, good luck to our neighbors. I'd like to keep the peace with them and with you guys, because you know how I get in trouble all the time. And that's all I'm saying about that.
Thank you, Rose. Anyone else like to speak on this item? Welcome.
I'm Elizabeth Moffat. I live at 7311 St. Helena Highway. Bill Pramick is also my arborist. I have an 84-inch diameter oak that supposedly General Fremont camped under. And yes, it does drop branches, and so we didn't build under it. We moved it. The house is not anywhere near this tree, and as it drops pieces, it's okay. I'm just curious, when they bought this property, did they think about this in advance? Is there some way that we could save this tree and move away from it and fence it off or something like that, because it is a lovely tree? But I'm really here because I'm wondering where Yountville is going with heritage oaks. What is the point of naming something a heritage oak if you keep cutting them down? And I have no problem with the business they're doing, but this is a precedent, and I was hoping going forward that the council might consider, when this happens again, you know, perhaps just making sure that people, when they buy property for a business, agree not to cut down the oak, or realize that oaks do drop branches. Mine still does. And so going forward, how can we save our other heritage oaks, because they are beautiful? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Now would be the time. Seeing no one else, if Mr. Stuart, you'd like to respond?
Yeah, there's some questions that were brought up, and I think it's only fair to answer them for everyone. There's the question of, you know, how many arborist reports do we have? We have 4 of them now. Why is that? And originally, when we had our first arborist report, it was right when we bought the property. We had seen that the roots had been cut through on the backside of the tree. We were concerned, and so we had an arborist come out and look at the tree, and he said, this should be removed. And in our first town council meeting, it was really insisted upon that we do everything that we could to save the tree. And I think the town staff recommended Bill Pramick to us as an arborist that we should consult with, and so we did. And Bill, as you can see, Bill's report says, hey, the tree's okay, everything's fine. And so we designed everything based on the report from Bill Pramick that said this tree's okay, as you can see. And but when our second town council meeting took place and the project was approved, one of the conditions of approval was that we have a tree protection plan. And we asked Bill Pramick if he would develop a tree protection plan for us, and he said, I cannot do that for you due to a conflict of interest, and you're going to have to find a different arborist for that. And I said, okay, well, who would you recommend? And he sent me 2 names of 2 different arborists. One of them is Shirley Sanborn, and that is who that third report is from. So on the recommendation of the town's arborist, I went and got the third report. I wasn't fishing for a new report that would somehow come out in my favor or pay for a new report. This was, the third report was solely at the urging of Bill Pramick and the town. So it wasn't until getting that report from Mr. Sanborn that we knew we had a problem. We had operated under the assumption the entire time that we were keeping the tree, and then as of Friday last week was when I found out that we now have a 4th report, which I only read over the weekend. I wasn't aware that until the town staff report that there was another assessment of the tree or that it was deemed to be hazardous still. So there hasn't been any underhanded dealings. I have just followed the guidance of our arborists and Bill Pramick. There's also the question of sort of commercial versus private property. If this was sort of my private residential property, I would certainly move my house away from the tree and, operate my private property in a non-commercial manner, ensuring that, my guests are not underneath the tree. But since this is a commercial property and the tree is so close to the street and the sidewalk, that means that, citizens just walking down the sidewalk could come into harm's way, and those are the people I'm most concerned about. And then finally, every oak started as a sapling. We will have more heritage oaks in the future, and I'm really sad to see this one go, but the tree that we're replacing with it will one day be a heritage oak as well. And it just takes time, and it's not going to happen in my lifetime, but it will be there for future generations. So that's all I had to say there. Are there any questions I can answer?
Councilmember Dornbecker, you have a question of the applicant?
Mr. Stewart, my first question is, why have there been no mitigations taken over since you purchased the property? Mm-hmm. Why have none of those suggestions by the arborist been done?
Yeah, so my father has explained it to me. A couple of years ago, my father was fully in charge of this project, and then I came on board to carry it through to the point where it is now. And he really sincerely thought that he had done all this work. And so when we were asked by the town staff, have you done this? We said, yes, we have, and we're going to go find, the receipts from having this work done. And when we started digging around, it turns out that we hadn't done as much as we thought we had. So it was a mistake on our part. But despite that, even if we had cabled the tree and done pruning, the existing damage to the tree would not make it suddenly, viable again. I mean, it's still, if I did cabling today and pruning today, the damage from over 10 years ago would still have a negative impact on the tree.
And my second question is, I read all of the information that you sent, mm-hmm. as well as the letters from the insurance carriers. Mm-hmm. Nowhere did I see in there any reference to the impact on your ability to get insurance and loans if that mitigation had been done. Have you checked into whether or not, in doing that mitigation with the tree, that would then alleviate that particular problem?
Yes, I understand your question. I think that, well, it's not really, I think. In talking to the several insurance companies I have talked to, the even mention of high risk puts them on alert. So that,
I know. Well, that's not my question.
Okay. I did not ask them, if I prune the tree or put cabling in, will you guys give me insurance? I did not ask them that.
Do you think that might be something that you might want to ask them?
I think that because my arborist has said to me that even doing those things still make this tree would still be high risk, makes me skeptical of their response, but I am certainly willing to ask them.
Thank you. There are my questions.
Any other questions before I close? Councilmember Hall?
Hi, thank you for all your updates. One question about the tree and the existing project as it was, because I think you mentioned it as well, it was sort of a sculpture, right?
Yes.
Have you considered going back to the way the existing design of your project is and reevaluating that? I know we went through an act of Congress or maybe an act of the town council to get it approved, but the question I put to you just in general is that something you would contemplate?
We're really happy with the way the project is now, and we think that getting a large specimen valley oak and planting it where the existing oak is will continue to sort of give us this beautiful courtyard feeling that we have. We haven't really considered, changing the design of any of the buildings or our concept, and our concept is currently approved, and we've put a lot of time, money, and effort into that, and we have fallen in love with it in the process. So it's not something that we really want to change.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Vice Mayor?
Is it Mr. Sanborn?
He's in the back.
Is he here? Do you mind me asking you a question? So this is a bit of a follow-up on Councilwoman Dorenbecker's comments. When I read your report, it sounded to me that if the tree was going to be saved, that the gist of your mitigation was move everything away from the tree. You can tell me if that's correct or not. But I guess where the question was if there are any actions that can be taken that would make this not a high-risk tree. When I read your report, it sounded like this is a high-risk tree no matter what, and your answer is either move stuff away from it and people away from it, or cut it down. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, one of the processes in tree risk assessment is how do you mitigate the hazard that you're facing, and one of those is using the term in the business of targets, moving the targets. So there was a cafe put directly underneath this tree, and that was why I said move the cafe, because you're just asking for, if something happens, for that tree to generate a huge and probably unfortunate impact.
The way I had been looking at this was along that is the ability to mitigate the risk, to move it out of high risk by taking some sort of measures was difficult. And the only way to get liability was not only, say, move a building, but, let's say keep people from even being underneath that tree, whether it's walking underneath or, am I correct in thinking that?
That is one approach to it. I also recommended a propping system, not probably like the one on the tree that you referred to at the hotel. I was thinking something more like, and I don't know how many people have seen the Danville oak, but it has a superstructure all underneath it and around it, so that if and when it does fail, and this has been done by engineers to make sure the structure is strong enough, it can't fall on any vehicles or people.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Unless you have anything else to add?
Really just that I don't want this tree to fall on anybody, and I don't want to be responsible for that. It would crush me to know that this tree, my responsibility, killed someone. And that's my main point here, is I just don't want that to happen. So, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to close the public hearing and invite discussion by council, and I'll start to my left to my right with Councilmember Dorenbecker. Your thoughts?
Well, I serve on the Watershed Information and Conservation Committee as well, and one of the plans that we have for the Napa Valley is to re-oak the Napa Valley, because this was once a valley with many oak stands. So, and in my own garden on Oak Circle, I have 3 oaks, and I am right now in the process of getting the limbs, doing the manipulation that we need to do to protect our oaks. So I honestly feel, since You knew when you purchased the property that the tree was there, and it's been several years and no mitigation has been done. I don't think I want to see that tree cut down because of that. I think the mitigation, personally, I think the mitigation should be done and we should try to protect that tree. And we passed an ordinance in this town to do so. And I think that we should live up to what we have said. So that's how I feel about it.
Thank you. Councilmember Mueller?
I thank to everyone in the public who's come and brought your very thoughtful comments. And I, too, have read quite thoroughly all the Arborist reports and considered them quite a bit. And I think that we went through this last year, or when the very first concept came through, and at that time we pretty much had an Arborist report that said it should come down, and an Arborist report that says there is no imminent danger of this tree coming down. So, and now reviewing 2 additional Arborist reports, I think the one thing that I can certainly take away that's consistent among all of them is that there's a long laundry list of mitigation factors that that they've all recommended. And so I think we should make every effort to save this tree and to minimize the risk and maximize the benefit of this tree to our community. I think that at this time removing that heritage oak is a last resort, and we're just not there yet. And so, Sandra, it's correct that I can make findings because they would be different than in your staff report. Is that correct? So in the staff report, there are 5 findings that we have to make. So, and I know Sandra will be copying these down quickly. We'll see how the rest of the vote goes and whether they're needed or not. But the first one is that I really cannot make a finding to remove the tree because one of the things that we look at is disease. And I didn't see one report. I am a scientist, and I'm pretty used to looking at diseases. I didn't see one piece of information about whether the tree was dead or the tree was dying, or that there was any fungus or mold or any pathogens or a few ants. So I really have no proof that this tree is diseased. And while the hazard was identified in several of the reports, there was another report that says there was no imminent hazard. And another one went on to say, as I brought up earlier with a question to our town attorney, that the construction was probably going to, around this tree was probably going to be the greatest hazard unless, the mitigation list was followed very closely. And the other one is undergrounding, the utilities. This is not interfering with any utilities because that's underground at that point. Another finding is that regarding the topography and the surface water flow, I think leaving this tree, from what I can assess, is not going to affect either one of those items. And I really can't see that removing the tree is going to have a detrimental effect on, or leaving the tree is going to have a detrimental effect on the surrounding property values. And in fact, our heritage oaks are part of the scenery, especially in Old Town, and that this really adds to the unique character and the beauty of this part of the town. Also, the finding that it's going to affect the economic enjoyment of the property. Well, the applicant has a report that says this was going to be the focal point. So it's like double jeopardy. You can't say it's going to be the focal point and really something of beauty and then come back and say, well, now it's going to be detrimental to my economic property development. And last is an item on sunlight. So I don't think the property requires any more sunlight. So removing the tree is really not going to necessitate that. So again, I'm not in favor of cutting down the tree at this time. Thank you.
Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. I want to thank the applicant and all the people who've participated tonight. It's interesting how excited we all get about a tree. And I want to be responsible and responsive to that as well. And I do hear the business side of this. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to try to go out and get a loan and have it denied because a tree is standing in the way, or insurance denied because a tree is standing in the way. But I don't know. I'm not smart enough, nor do I have enough education as some of my colleagues or some of the professionals that are in this room to tell this group or this council whether or not the mitigation factors would have saved it or not. But I don't know that. So I would rather err on the side of caution and go back to sort of part of my commentary about whether or not we have to revisit this project. And it sounds as if, or at least it feels to me as if, that might be at least a beginning point. This is a 150-year-old tree, and no one in this room can say they've seen what this tree has. At this juncture, we're really fortunate to have as many as we do in our community, and to remove another one means there's one less. And I understand we can mitigate that by putting trees back. I plant trees in my backyard all the time. Usually they're not 150 years old because I don't think we can find them or move them very easily. This is not just the home and the property you're going to own for your business. This is also going to be, that tree is a habitat for the wildlife, and they've been here longer than we have as well. I don't necessarily know what it means in regards to your original project and the findings as to how we might continue to work to mitigate or to save this tree, but I think we do need to explore it. One of the languages or one of the sayings was, I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're ready to just say arbitrarily, or even with good counsel on both sides, it's time to move it if we can possibly mitigate this potential interest. And I think that's what our direction is. I sit across the street a lot of times, because that's where my employer likes to go to lunch. And so we sit there and we look out across the street. And I don't see McGrath's garage, which I think a lot of people in this room would say, well, McGrath's garage, please. The reality is I see that oak tree, and I see it leaving there being a detriment to this community. And I just want to be mindful of that. And I don't want to have to do that until we're at that point. And I just don't know that we're there yet. I do have, and want to, again, reference that the applicant, the time of this project is delayed, or maybe seemingly delayed again. And if finding insurance and funding is going to be an issue, that's, I guess, a risk I'm willing to take at this juncture to try to save the tree. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Well, I think, yes, it's a grand tree, but I'll have to say that I think it always comes into play as other people's grand trees are easy to talk about when they either cause liability to you or someone else, and we're going to have an application coming up next that's exactly the same situation. That is I think it's really different when it's yours and your situation. And I always try to put myself in the situation of the applicant, the person that's coming forward. I have 3 highly inappropriate trees on my 6,000 square foot property, which are of great expense to maintain. And I just don't. In this situation, to me, it does not seem unreasonable. I can't say that I visually can trump what multiple experts have said, and should tell somebody to take on a level of liability that I would not be willing to take on myself. So I think the mitigation measures of a 72 inch or what staff has proposed to me is reasonable. People say move their house. I don't know how big of a piece of property it is. I don't know what the cost of that is. It's tremendous cost. It's not really, in some ways, I think it's almost not possible in this situation. So I find the recommendation to be reasonable, and I would support the resolution.
Thank you. First thing I'll say is, I can speak very comfortably for this entire council and our staff that we take these types of decisions very seriously. I don't appreciate anyone that accuses us of anything else. And so, we have gone through this before, because when you live in a city that has trees, you have issues with trees. I grew up in Oakland. That's oak land, the land of oaks. And when you populate your community, near and under trees, you are basically putting yourselves at risk. You never know. We've seen trees that appear very healthy. You talk to the property owner at the north end of town who had a tree that was appeared reasonably healthy that fell down and crushed their house. And it wasn't on anyone's radar that it was a hazard. And we have a grand heritage oak along a very popular pathway that looks like it has significant risk, and it's still there. And we have made, taken measures to mitigate the risk, but we can't eliminate the risk. If the only way to eliminate tree risk is remove all the trees, and none of us want that. I don't think it's realistic to say if you have any significant tree, especially a heritage oak, on your property, that you should then just keep everyone and everything away from that tree. I think that's unrealistic. They are beautiful, and they need to be replaced when their time is coming to an end and over. I don't feel comfortable asking any member of the public or a private property owner to assume the risk that I wouldn't want to assume myself. So I think in the interest of public safety, I would support removal of this tree and replacement with the largest option, whether that's 72-inch, whether there's something bigger as possibly has been found out there in the tree world. But I would not feel comfortable. Basically, we would be blacklisting that property from any development of any kind. And it's unfortunate that some of the most beautiful trees have damage. We've had this happen in other parts of the town where it turns out a car ran into it way back in the day before we had street lights, and there was damage that eventually decayed to the point of needing to remove a tree for fear of it falling over on someone or something. I don't take any pleasure in removing one of the most beautiful, as Councilmember Hall said, one of the most beautiful trees on our streetscape. It looks healthy, it looks balanced, but when you get down to it, and I see all the pictures in the Arborist reports, there are signs of either damage or failure. I can't I'm not an expert, so I'm going to defer to the experts' opinions that don't have any personal or financial incentive to give any specific opinion. If they were to do that, they would not be professional and be in business for very long. So I respect the professional recommendations that have been presented to us. With a significant replacement in some number of years, we would adapt to that new streetscape with that new healthier tree, and I think that I would certainly feel a lot more comfortable. I don't think asking the applicant to move a building over a few feet or telling everyone that you can't go near the tree is a reasonable request for me to make, certainly. So I think given the conditions that have been presented to us and the mitigation that I'm prepared to require, I could support the applicant's request to remove it with significant tree replacement. Vice Mayor, one more comment?
Well, I thought of this and I didn't say it, so I just wanted to say it. I totally support the goals of, if we call it reforesting or planting more valley oaks in the valley. The father who talked earlier, they should talk to the folks in Calistoga about the elms and some of the setback requirements there, which concern me greatly. You may know more about that than all of us here combined. For 2 years. I have the concern that when we take such a hard line on trees, you would be a fool to plant a valley oak on your property, because you going down the line saying once it hits a certain size, you're rendering part of your own property unusable down the line. I think that by taking a very strict line and saying this is the line in the sand we will draw, no one would voluntarily, unless they have tremendous amounts of land that can't be used would ever voluntarily put themselves in that position. So I think we kind of back ourselves into the difficulty of reforesting the valley when we take such a hard line on these kind of situations. So I just wanted to say that I think that sometimes we can kind of shoot ourselves in the foot.
Any further comment? Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote since it sounds like we have difference of opinion here. So
We need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
I'll second that. So now I could ask for a roll call vote. Kind of forgot that minor detail.
Yeah.
I was just checking to make sure our town attorney was paying attention.
There's no number on the resolution, by the way. At least, am I correct, or am I looking at?
That's a different one.
I was going to scan down because I realized we didn't say the number.
320214.
Okay, so my motion is for that one.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Chilton. Roll call
Yes.
vote. Mayor Dunbar.
Yes.
Councilmember Hall.
No.
Councilmember Moeller.
No.
Councilmember Dorenbecker.
No. Sorry.
So with that 3-2 vote, then the applicant's request is denied. And I think that concludes this item.
Yes, it does. 3-2.
So that's the result of that. I thank all of you that came here to express your opinions, and I suspect that the applicant may want to talk to town staff sometime in the near future about what your options are moving forward. So thanks everybody for participating in that item. And I will, what's that?
Sorry.
I will go ahead and move ahead to our next item. I'll give folks that I know that were here for that issue to head on out. But we are going to keep talking about heritage oak trees. And this is a request for tree removal from the Bundy property. So we'll start that with a staff report as well, please.
Right. So you have another request to remove a heritage valley oak, and this one is a 26-inch DBH located at Rancho de Napa. And the applicant's concern is that there is a split and a crack in the tree's trunk and that this could lead to failure. He is concerned with potential damage to the foundation and the flooring in his residential unit, as well as lifting of the sidewalk and the adjacent shed. There are issues of maintenance. There's damage to a skylight and cleaning of roof gutters. And there's also a complaint as to the dropping of acorns and oak balls. And when this application was submitted, staff asked the applicant to submit an arborist report so that we could evaluate whether these impacts are the result of the tree and whether tree removal or mitigation measures are the best way to address these impacts. The applicant claimed that the cost of an arborist report is an excessive burden, and the town's heritage tree ordinance does provide a provision for financial assistance for the maintenance of a heritage oak in cases of financial hardship. The code, however, is silent on the conditions that would qualify as financial hardship, and staff was unable to make the determination that it exists. We did ask the applicant, or reiterated that we would like to see an arborist report, and it's in its absence, the application was deemed incomplete. The applicant requested moving forward to the town council based on the information in his application and included in the staff report. As you know from our previous item, that there is a heritage tree survey and map. It identifies both the listed and numbered trees, but it also identifies any native oak with a circumference of 20 inches or greater. And the reason for that is we can't always have a listing of all heritage trees because smaller trees go into larger trees. And this tree is an 83-inch circumference tree, so it definitely qualifies as a heritage oak. We know that there are findings that must be made for a tree removal. 5 of those were mentioned here tonight. And in order to make those findings, each of the impacts needs to be evaluated. As to the first request, as to the crack and the split in the tree that causes concern, staff notes that often mitigation measures can be implemented, and the Villaggio Spa Heritage Oak is an example of that. It's worked for over 8 years now, and Without an arborist report, staff simply isn't in a position in order to determine if this is an option and to evaluate the merits of the request. The applicant indicates there's damage to the house and the foundation, and damage to residence is considered significant in terms of impacts, and it very well could merit removal where the damage can be traced to this tree and where the mitigation measures such as root removal or a root barrier or other type of measure would be ineffective or not deemed feasible. But again, an arborist report is necessary to make this finding. I would say that this is probably the strongest of the applicant's arguments because it relates to property damage. There's the issue of lifting the sidewalk and the shed. However, in terms of the findings, this is given lesser weight than damage to the residents because a sidewalk can be ground, a shed can be moved. It's a different level of impact, and there are options to deal with it. There are the issues of maintenance, and the maintenance issues alone wouldn't justify removal of the tree, and certainly there's a level of inconvenience that's expected with the care and maintenance of a heritage oak on one's property, and it needs to be weighed against the request to remove it. There's the issue of the dropping of acorns, and staff has observed that oaks are dropping acorns at a greater frequency this year. We consulted with the town's arborist that indicated this could be a result of the prolonged drought condition, and this is expected to just be temporary. So in light of the fact that it's just a temporary condition, this too wouldn't weigh in favor of removing the tree. Although staff does acknowledge there's an annoyance factor, and it may be greater for a mobile home community where the lots are small, the houses are close to one another, and a tree just simply has a greater impact on a property. In the case of the mobile home parks, there are several standing seam metal roofs, so the dropping is much louder. But again, whether mitigation measures can be taken in this temporary period, it's unknown. So staff's biggest problem with this application is that we just don't have an arborist report in order to evaluate this removal. Staff isn't an expert in all things tree related, and we defer greatly to an arborist opinion when evaluating these requests and making recommendations to council. I do want to mention there are several issues that are unique to the mobile home parks, and I raised this earlier. There are small lots where the houses are very close to one another, so large trees like oaks are in closer proximity, and they may have increased impacts to those property owners. In fact, the Homeowners Association rules that are in your packet indicate that trees over 15 feet are not permitted within the park. And that would apply to new trees that are planted, but not necessarily existing trees. And this is likely in recognition of this condition. I do want to call your attention to the fact that we're aware of 2 other oak trees in the Rancho de Napa community where homeowners would like to remove the oaks for very similar conditions as noted in this staff report, and in instances where the applicant is unwilling or unable to submit an arborist report. So it really puts staff into a bind in evaluating these requests and may result in more requests coming before you. There's the issue that in a mobile home park, the homeowner is the tenant and the land is owned by the park ownership. And this could have an impact on the determination of financial hardship since it's a shared ownership model. And then there's the issue of replacement trees, and I've noted how there are small lots in the mobile home community. And the town requires replacement trees, but where are those to be put on a small parcel where we may run into the same situation years down the line? In this case, the applicant wants to replace the tree with a small decorative tree like a camellia or a crepe myrtle, but this isn't considered a like replacement in terms of the ordinance. The idea of the heritage tree ordinance is that if we remove some of the grander old heritage oaks, we plant younger ones that someday will become heritage oaks. But in the mobile home park, it may be inappropriate. There's this tree theory of right tree, right place, and staff's not in a position to make that determination without an arborist report. Perhaps a better option in a mobile home community is to plant replacement trees in the common areas. However, in this instance, we don't have any indication of what willingness on behalf of park ownership there would be to plant in that location. So with these issues in mind, the Town Council has a couple options. It could recommend or could require the applicant to obtain an arborist report so that we can appropriately evaluate this approval. The Town Council could determine what amount, if any, the town is willing to contribute to that arborist report. And this option would require that the item be continued from tonight's meeting date. Another option would be to approve or deny the permit based on information that's in before the Town Council tonight and in the staff report. And we've provided a skeleton resolution, but if you choose either of these options, we'd have to fill in the missing elements. Thank you.
Questions of the staff report?
Yes, please.
Councilmember Dornbecker.
Yes, Sandra, can you answer this? Can we require the landowner, not the applicant, but the landowner, to have all of the oaks inspected in the Rancho de Napa and to take mitigation for all of them? Let me ask
I would turn to the town attorney for some help answering that question.
I'll answer that temporarily while our town attorney is looking in the large binder. I spoke to Mr. Bundy. He may be able to speak to this issue because it has to do with the lease agreement signed by the tenants. That, if I understand correctly, it is the burden of the tenant.
I remember reading that.
It's the burden of the tenant to maintain the trees,
If they planted
even though
them.
they're on common property. That's the way the lease is written, according to Mr. Bundy. And I'll see if our town attorney finds any language.
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of the town council, the town's municipal code provides the town has jurisdiction over the planting, setting out, location, placement of all trees in public streets. Okay, so we go on to the second sentence, which says nothing in this section relieves an owner's duties as set forth in the tree section, nor does anything in the section nullify the potential liability. So the question is whether or not we can require a property owner to conduct an inspection of all trees. The answer is probably not, unless we have some indication that all trees are a potential hazard or a nuisance. I just don't see anything in our code that imposes that kind of responsibility.
Well, what if lessees on that property have concerns? Is there anything we can do to help them to persuade the landowner to inspect those trees that are, contemplated to be dangerous?
Well, in the situation we have this evening, we have an application for removal without an arborist report. While the applicant is the tenant, it's still the owner's property. Now, the owner has consented, and it's part of your agenda package, to having the tree removed, but the town could certainly turn back to the property owner and say, the town's not going to consider this application until there's a report. Now, I recognize the impact that may have on the tenant or the applicant in this situation, but to make that imposition upon the property owner, the town can attempt to do that, but the property owner can just say, well, then I don't want to have the tree removed after all.
I see. Thank you.
Other questions?
If I may add one more thing, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
However, if there is unfortunate injury or damage, it doesn't relieve the property owner from any liability that the property owner may incur. So the incentive there really would be if there are potentially if there are trees that are potentially harmful or damaging to property or individuals, the carrot, if you will, is to try to protect the property owner from any liability.
Thank you.
So just to follow up that, even if it's written into a lease agreement with the tenant that the tenant is responsible, the legal responsibility remains with the property owner?
It's still my answer to that
Or
would
at
be
least
yes.
it could be litigated.
Yes, that is correct. It doesn't relieve, the issue there would be actual notice or either actual or if there is some form of reasonable notice to the property owner. I can see a property owner saying, well, I don't want to inspect the trees because then I have actual notice and I'm going to have to do something about it. But even if it's in the tenant's agreement that the tenant is responsible for all injury or damages, that's not going to be likely to be saving the property owner from potential exposure. There's other theories of law on the manner in which that contract is offered, because if you don't sign that contract, you don't get to be a tenant there. So there's what's called a contract of adhesion. I know that's a legal term, and I don't want to use too much of that, but it's almost as if you are forced to sign that to be able to stay there, to be there. Those are generally not upheld by courts.
Councilmember Mueller, I saw you were reaching for the microphone.
Yes, on just along those similar lines, and it doesn't have a number, but under this item, it's the applicant submittal letter. I trust you had a chance to look at that.
Yes.
And there appears to be page 2 and 3 and my eyeballs, 2 and 3 of this lease agreement, but not page 1. In just your legal opinion, does this lease say that it is the responsibility of the tenant? I know there's one highlighted section. You can take a couple minutes to look at it.
The highlighted section discusses the tree removal process.
Right.
Let me go back to that language.
Is there anything in here you can point to that says who's responsible? I did hear what you said before, and that was very helpful, but...
Right.
There's a landscaping item right before the highlighted area.
Yeah. If you look at...
Look at 3.9.
Well, in terms of it's the responsibility of the tenant. It also provides all homeowners must maintain their home and space in all applicable buildings in compliance with community, local, state, and federal housing and health codes. I'm not sure that the or the statement that this has now been passed on away from the landlord is really in this type of language. It certainly imposes a responsibility to the tenant, as they've described him here as the homeowner, to be responsible for keeping the premises in a clean and safe sanitary manner, to maintain the landscaping, which includes but not limited to trees and shrubs. It places that on the tenant, but it doesn't relieve the responsibility for liability away from the property owner.
I guess I'm still just a little, and you might not be able to help anymore with this. If somebody has, let's say an Arborist report was generated, an extremely dangerous tree that, is really going to fall over, it's like, who's responsible? Who should we really be talking to?
Well, we would be talking to the property owner.
Okay.
As the town. The property owner may say, well, wait, I have this contract, and the contract says it's really the responsibility of the tenant. Let's assume for the moment that tonight, and I'm just saying hypothetically, I'm not looking to predispose of this issue, that the town approves this application.
Right.
And then the tenant, the applicant who's here tonight, is then party responsible for removing the tree. The property owner has consented to that occurring, but I believe what the third-party agreement between the property owner and the tenant, the property owner would say, the obligation for me to, as the property owner, to remove it doesn't exist. It's the responsibility of the tenant. Now, the town is granting the application, if you were to grant it, to the applicant. And if they decided to say, well, property owner, we can't afford to remove it, you should. The property owner could still say, well, I consented to having it removed if it was granted, but I didn't assume the responsibility to remove it.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hall?
I only have one question of Sandra at this time. I didn't necessarily get this out of the financial hardship language, but don't we have an obligation to at least have an arborist report? I mean, even if we have to fund it ourselves, to at least have or support that process? Because, I mean, you're kind of flying blind here without that backup. Is that correct?
If I can...
Yeah, actually, I spoke to
Okay,
the
you
town
did?
attorney on
Okay.
that very point, so he's prepped.
Yes, Councilmember Hall and members of the town council. Let me carry it to this process. If the town was to act without any type of expert view, and the town approved removing the tree, someone who was opposed to that could say, well, on what basis did you authorize the removal other than just the will of the council? Conversely, if the town was to deny the removal of the tree, the applicant may say, well, what was that based upon? The law, I think the way that our ordinances are crafted, while it's not mandatory to have that expert or arborist or landscape architect report, it certainly would be something that, as your town attorney, I would recommend that you do have, so that the basis for whatever decision you do make can be supported if anybody challenges that in a court of law. Because the arborist report would hopefully say this tree is a healthy tree, or this tree has its issues. And I think it was stated earlier, recognizing that you could line up what seems to be now 4 arborists and get 5 opinions throughout the process. So,
I mean, I just in deference to the to the applicant, I believe the tree may be damaging property. I just, without having someone professional at least ink something, it's hard to know whether that's.
So I'm going to add to that, since we did have a conversation prior to the meeting about this very issue, in discussing the financial hardship component of our ordinance. There is no language that the town attorney and I found regarding the town's obligation to financially support tree removal. It specifically states the town may assist in the maintenance of heritage trees on private property if financial hardship is determined. So the financial hardship component may not even be applicable for removal at all if we deny the removal and require it be maintained. Then that financial hardship, and at least in my interpretation of that, it would be an option of the town council to help with that maintenance, but it's not written to apply to removal. Is that accurate?
that is
Town
correct.
attorney?
That's
Okay.
section 17.96.040 in the big binder.
Other questions of the staff report?
Not at this time.
Vice Mayor?
Well, I guess, Sandra, maybe this is for you. The thing that is most obvious to me is having a structure like these structures this close to these trees is clearly inappropriate. I mean, I almost think that's indisputable. Is an arborist report going to make some sort of a statement of that? I mean, it's not going to we talk about the health, or I don't know whether it's a healthy tree or not. That doesn't seem to be the issue to me. Obviously, it's too close to a house. I can go on the internet and research that. I mean, it's clear. Do we need an arborist to tell us that, to make a finding of these 5 findings in this situation?
Well, I think an arborist report is necessary to indicate that the impacts to the residents based on that proximity are due to the tree, and that there are no mitigation measures that can be taken to reduce that. It is very close to the residents. It's 7 feet on one side and 15 on another. So an arborist report may address the issue of wrong tree, wrong place, and is this just inappropriate in this location, and would that justify it? We're really looking for a third-party professional opinion to weigh in on all the issues that surround the tree.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the staff report? Councilmember Mueller?
Well, that's generated another question. There was, and this is probably before your time, it's actually right behind the McGrath property on Jefferson. Somebody chose to rebuild a house in the town, and that tree is literally like a foot from their front porch. You probably know what house I'm talking about over there. At one time we said that if you're going to build a house here, you will build it around this tree, and you will take care of all the mitigation methods or measures, to maintain this tree. So that was, I don't know what year that was, but that house was probably built, less than 8 years ago, I would imagine, or 10 years ago. So it happened recently. So do we really have specific requirements, or is these things always done on a case-by-case basis? Like some people, they have to keep the tree, certain, as the vice mayor is trying to argue that, that the tree's obviously too close. I mean, these are gray areas, and I don't know what are...
It's generally done on a case-by-case basis. There's generally an arborist involved, a project arborist that makes recommendations and gives an opinion as to the design of a structure and its location in proximity to a tree. So I guess best information at the time is what we use. Staff has struggled with our heritage tree ordinance, where it doesn't offer the most guidance in helping applicants and guiding them through the process. So we are working on a complete update to that ordinance to hopefully be able to answer these questions a little better. It doesn't serve us well right now.
Okay, thanks.
I noticed we could use some better resources.
A follow-up to the town attorney on that question. I think the circumstances are different in the sense of the property owner versus tenant issue in this case, where there wasn't that situation with we had some authority over the design review of that property being a single-family residence, where we don't have the authority to tell the mobile home park property owner where they can and can't put their lots. Correct or not?
That's correct, because it's zoned for that purpose. So, that is correct.
So there wouldn't be quite the same oversight that the town would have to try to keep this situation from. We couldn't have necessarily said you can't put units on either side of this tree.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions of the staff report? I think I'll save mine for after we hear some testimony. So I'll open the public hearing and invite. I'm guessing Mr. Bundy is going to have a few things to say here.
You'd be right, Mayor. Good evening. My name's Alman Bundy, and I reside at 230 San Miguel in Yountville, California, with my wife Yvonne. And it's been interesting to see this first application happen to be on this night, because I learned a few things. One of the things I learned is that cost seems to be no deterrent to the town of Yountville in terms of saving a oak tree. That oak tree is not 150 years old that I'm talking about tonight. It's not 100 years old. It's not 50 years old. In fact, the park's almost 40 years old. That tree may have been about this high when the first home was put in there. When I moved in, when Yvonne and I moved in, the tree was peeking over our house about maybe 6 or 8 feet. And in the 7 years we've lived there, it's now about 20 feet over our house. I heard somebody talk about how fast oak trees grow. I can be a personal testament to that. My wife and I love nature and we love trees. The last thing we want to do is spend a lot of our money to take down a tree. It's only doing what trees do. It's growing, spreading out, sending out its roots, searching for more nutrients and water. The problem is, it's just in the wrong place. 7 feet from my house, and I know I said 15 feet in my application, but I went back and measured, it's only 12 feet from my neighbor's house. It has a split in the tree. It's not just a tree that's growing up and then branching out. It's a split tree. From about 2.5, 3 feet up, it splits, and there's a large scar on the tree. I don't know what you call it, I don't know what the arborist language is, but it's obviously a place where the bark is failing to actually close around the tree like a healthy tree would. It's getting worse, the split. About a year and a half ago, I thought I was making application to get the tree out, and I won't go into all the details about that, but I did was occasion to bring a picture to the town of what is included in your, should be included in your packet. And you can look at the picture was taken then and the pictures taken recently, and you can see that there's that area has changed. In addition, it's also created a bulge, which is just below the point where the tree splits. It wasn't noticeable before. I'm not going to say it wasn't there before. I empty the garbage every week and I see that tree and look at it. It wasn't noticeable before. There are instances this year of oak trees that are supposed to be safe falling, and reports that the drought is making the problem worse and making them more susceptible to falling and causing them to drop limbs. We paid to have this tree trimmed once when we first moved there. And my neighbor, I believe, also paid to have the tree limbs that are over her property trimmed about that same time. So in the last 5 or 6 years, we've paid to have that trimmed. The tree's damaging our home. When we first moved in, there was a little crack in our sidewalk, just a little, you could see it, a little crack in our sidewalk. That crack is now lifting up the sidewalk, as you can see in your pictures. It's cracked a lot, it's lifting it up like this. And you can see right where the root goes over to the sidewalk. The whole section's lifted. Earlier this year, we noticed a small crack running across the travertine tile in our kitchen. And if you stand in my kitchen and just look at that crack and look right out the window, you'll see the crack in the sidewalk, and you can follow it right to the tree. And there are no other cracks in our kitchen floor. It's only one right there. There's also, you can go outside and notice now where the crack is and the sidewalk is lifted, it's actually lifted up the framing to the skirting on our home. So you go over here, you can see it's about 2 inches, and over here it's about 2 inches, but here it's lifted up slap even with the siding. You look under my house, you can see there's a pier that's in that general area that's supportive of my house. In addition to this situation, there's a lot of wind that can come through that area. We live in one of the wind tunnels, lifted off part of my garage roof last year. And we're concerned that this split tree with the heavy limbs that are over our house and our neighbor's house, actually more to my neighbor's house, could fall, be blown down and cause great damage. This tree's big enough, it could cause it could cause a lot of damage to our homes. Could injure somebody, could kill somebody. So there's a concern about it. And it reminds you all the time that it's there, because I am woken up at night not only with the stuff hitting on my roof, but I can hear it hitting my neighbor's roof. I'd like to kind of just go real quick to a few other things that aren't as concerning about, the damage to our home, the possible somebody being hurt by a tree failing and breaking, and just go down the list. The nearby flood wall, which is very close to it, could be taken out, and that could be taken out when the tree would be blown down during a storm, when we're having rains or possibly floods, which would be the absolute worst time that would happen, but maybe the most likely time that a tree would fall. We've had financial costs. Last year I paid $800 to have a skylight replaced. That stuff falling from the tree cracked and broke and started to leak. And the sounds, the roots have been my neighbor's shed. I mean, everybody says, well, that's not a big deal. It's been my neighbor's shed. You can see the picture there. It's unusable. She can't use that shed. And it's the seam roots going over there and taking care of that issue. I talked about how fast the tree is growing. I'd like to address the lease issue a lot of it. There's a lot of talk about that. My career in finance was in leases, and I know a lot about leases. And the responsibility for maintaining, taking care of that tree was transferred to me in my lease agreement. And I didn't include, I showed it to the town staff. I didn't include my whole lease agreement because my lease agreement It's a lot of pages, and it doesn't really have a lot to do with it, except to say that I will apply by all the rules in the park, which is what you see in there about who's responsible for that. And it also has a sheet where you can see that's checked, where I sign that I will, you'll see this is a Schedule A to my lease, that the home site is maintained by the homeowner. So this has effectively been sent to me. And even though it doesn't say, oh, the liability if it falls isn't sent to me, if this falls on my neighbor's house, I don't think an attorney is going to say, well, this should really be the property owners. I think I have liability if I'm not doing something about preventing a tree falling on my neighbor's house. It's in my property that I lease, and I have all the rights of and the responsibilities of. So just want to answer the lease question. You know, while you may feel like you can make the park do something about it, it doesn't stop my problem from being what it is. And it doesn't relieve me from having liability. That tree, I said before, is not old. It's not tagged. I walked around this city and saw all the tags and all the trees and said, okay, here's all the trees that are, you know, I looked at my tree, there's no tag on it. There's no way for me to know that this was part of the heritage tree. Didn't get a copy of the heritage tree ordinance when I moved into town. Fast growing, we talked about that. Mitigation cost, when I listened to the mitigation cost that were being asked by the prior applicant, and people were talking about numbers like, you know, $15,000 or $20,000, like, you know, and propping it up like the tree in front of Villaggio, like it's play money. I live in a area that's been set aside in this town for senior citizens and people who lived on moderate incomes. And having a $50 application fee, then a $500 to $650 arborist fee is, frankly, economic. Hardship's not the word I'm thinking about. It's almost prejudicial against people who don't have the money to come forward and try to get these things done. So that's the, you know, a thing that's concerning to me. I have a question of what the purpose of the town council is in relationship to an ordinance if they have the power to say we don't have to have an arborist report to look at. We can actually exercise some common sense once in a while and say, this isn't a 150-year-old, 60-foot, 70-foot oak tree. It's a 30-year-old tree. It's not sitting in a situation where other people in the town see it all the time. The town didn't know it was there until I wanted to take it out. It doesn't take a rocket scientist or a rocket arborist to look at this situation and see the trees cracking the sidewalk. And you can look there and follow it and say, that's probably what's lifting up this pier and causing the floor in the kitchen to crack. When I was about a 5-year or 6-year-old kid growing up in the country, I could have walked up and looked at that situation and said, boy, that tree needs to go. We've lived with this tree and spent money and the effort to take care of this tree. Now we're afraid of the tree. The situation is untenable to us. The winds and rains hopefully are coming back. I'm asking tonight that the town council vote to let us take down this hazard now, before more damage is done to my property, before something unfortunate happens to me or my neighbor. I'll be glad to answer any questions I can.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bundy. Any questions of the applicant at this time? No? Thank you very much. Any folks in support of the request before us tonight, if you would like to come forward and speak? Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm the neighbor, and I own the property next door along with my mom. We've been there since 2002.
If you wouldn't mind just
I'm sorry.
Giving your name for our record.
Yeah, my name is Ron Worley. My mom, Carol Worley. We both live there.
Thank you.
Actually, my mom lives there now. I've moved out to a house a couple of doors down. When we moved there, that tree was quite small. I could manage the maintenance of it myself. And it's doubled and almost tripled in size now, and I can't do it anymore. I'm older. I can't take care of it with a pole saw like I used to be able to. It's out of control. And it's way too close. It's destroyed the shed. When I lived there with my mom in 2002, excuse me, I lived in the master bedroom at the back of the house, which is over, the tree is over the top of that. It didn't concern me. Now, I've moved out, I'm 2 doors down. My mom would like to move into that master bedroom, but she's scared to death to move back there. She had an experience years ago sitting on a patio where one of these trees, actually a limb exploded and almost killed her. So she has an experience with this kind of a tree. She knows what it can do. And she won't go to that bedroom. That's the biggest bedroom in the house. She'd really like to be there, but she can't. She's scared of it. So that's my concern with this tree. It's damaged. It's already trashed our shed. It's totaled. It needs to be replaced. Al's property suffered a lot of damage. The tree needs to go. It's not going to get any better. It's going to get worse. I can't tell you for sure if it's diseased or not, but it's not going to get any better. It's just going to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we can't maintain it. We don't have the resources or the expertise to do it. We can't afford to hire people to do it. So that's our situation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. Any others who would like to speak on behalf of the applicant? Would anyone like to speak in opposition to the application? Seeing no one else, I'll close the public hearing and invite discussion by council. I'll start to my left this time. Councilmember Moeller.
Well, again, I'd like to thank everybody who came tonight to give us a lot of information about this tree. I think that what's most compelling to me, I understand what you're saying, but I've also listened very closely, and we've asked our town attorney many questions tonight, and I just think that it is most prudent for us to get a document from an arborist that gives us more information about this tree. And I think that we'll find out exactly how old this tree possibly is from the arborist. Not that I doubt about the age of this tree, but, for example, he can make a lot of findings about this tree that, is going to give us sufficient information about really how to go about dealing with it if it is truly a potential hazard. So that's, I'm not approving or denying this request. I'm just considering this an incomplete application right now until we get information from an arborist.
Thank you. Councilmember Hall.
Yes, I also want to thank the applicant and other members of the public for participating in this. I do see this as a very different project than what we saw earlier or what we saw just before this. And to be clear, this is a tree that's right now over a residence that's two residences that are occupied by individuals. So that in and of itself and the potential threat it provides or it has to those and the inhabitants is clearly an issue. I would like to know at least that there's been an arborist report on the tree so that we can at least have it documented to protect the town in some form or fashion. But I judge it differently from the other project in that the other project is going to have all the buildings and pieces to that parcel changed and evolved. And so it's not where there are people living underneath it at this juncture. It's also not of the same relative age, although I can't prove that with an arborist report. I would feel more comfortable with that. The one thing that wasn't brought up or discussed is, and I think it's been recommended by staff, is to have any sort of or a replacement tree that would be put in place if we're going to remove an oak. I mean, again, these are trees that are important to this valley, and my assumption is that there would be at least some mitigation from that standpoint if we're going to be removing an oak, that somehow we would be replacing one somewhere in the town, presumably on the landowner's property, and the landowner could take responsibility for that action because they've moved people or they've moved tenants into parts of their property that are going to require that they have to have this tree removed. That's my thinking on this. I really do feel that there needs to be at least some professional review or oversight. Even at 44, I can tell you that it appears that tree may be having effect or impact on the parcel or on the home. I can't prove that. I'm not smart enough, although I think I could probably agree. I'd like to have someone else at least sign off on that so that we have, again, a rationale for why this is a reasonable thing to move forward with. And those are my comments.
Thank you. Councilmember Dornbecker.
Thank you. Having seen the photo of the oak tree, I do believe that it is a hazard because it split very early on into two. I would support, and there's one other thing I wanted to mention about the lease. In 3.9, just above where you highlighted, Al, it says, all shrubs and plants left by preceding homeowner become part of the community and may not be removed or damaged by successive homeowners without prior approval of the management, which to me says become owned by the landowner. Anyway, that being aside, I would like to see us financially help Mr. Bundy, Mr. and Mrs. Bundy, to get an arborist report that would then sufficiently document that I believe this tree is a dangerous tree, and in a different way, I believe this tree must come down. But I do believe that we want to get that arborist report, and we should financially help pay for that report. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Several years ago, I think we had a discussion. There was somebody who had a tree. I think it was, I don't know if it was maintenance or they wanted it taken down. It was along the creek over here. And we said, first of all, our ordinances are vague. And then you get in the whole idea of what constitutes financial hardship. How are you going to determine that? Richard's got 3 kids. Anything is financial hardship to him, no matter how much money he makes. So I get concerned about that. I totally understand the concept. There's two concerns I have. One is the idea of precedent. We just say, you know what, there's no arborist report, there's no this or that. We approve it, and the next person's going to come in and say, well, you didn't make Mr. Bundy do it. So therefore, we've got a precedent, and the next application is going to come, and I see that issue. The flip side of it, I mean, it takes me 2 minutes on Google to go and see that you're supposed to not build within not only the drip line, but 50% of the drip line around a house. So we all are acknowledging what an arborist report is going to say. It's ridiculous to go out and have the taxpayers pay for it, or Mr. Bundy pay for it, or anybody else pay for it. So I support granting the application to take it down.
Thank you. I'll start my comments by referencing 3.10 in response to Councilmember Dornbecker's reference to 3.9, where if this is truly legally binding, the terms of this lease, it does state even if community property, I'm paraphrasing, it's still to be maintained by the homeowner. What I don't see is any requirement in here that the removal of a hazardous or dangerous or diseased tree be the responsibility of the tenant. I see it states in 311 as highlighted, no tree shall be allowed to become a hazard. If that tree is a hazard, as far as my understanding of our town attorney's evaluation and my reading of this language is the property owner cannot allow a hazardous condition to continue. I don't have any doubt that an expert's opinion will confirm the conditions are at least in some percentage related to this tree. I do agree with some of what the other council members have said, partly about precedent and partly about having a solid legal foundation on which to stand, not only for this application, but I suspect that we're about to see a second, since we see some residents here, and even a third. So I do think that we need to follow procedure as it is written right now, and we need to require an expert opinion to validate all the conditions that have been presented. They seem obvious, and I would tend to agree that they are most likely related to this tree. I would encourage not only staff to help expedite this. I stopped short of the town footing the bill, but I think the town can certainly contact in support of your request the property owner and let them know that there is a hazardous condition that's been presented by a resident and that they need to respond more. I think they feel like they got off easy by just writing a letter saying, yeah, go ahead and cut it down. I don't think that removes their obligation to you as residents. So I think that it would be foolish in their opinion, if I was in their position as the park owner, to think they were free and clear of the responsibility they have to you as tenants, as well as just doing the right thing by the people that they allow on their property. I would even see them being responsible for the cost of the arborist report and potentially the removal of the tree, because they state right here that no tree shall become a hazard, but it does not say that hazard is a responsibility of the individual property owner. So I tend to agree that I feel like this is an incomplete application without the expert opinion. We do need to comply with what we have established as precedent for virtually all other applications to remove trees, especially the heritage oak. I am much more inclined to allow this heritage oak tree to be removed given the conditions that surround it. That's not really my concern so much as the process, that I do think if we can exert any authority to expedite that process and require the property owner to be more engaged in this condition, as well as the other two conditions that we're aware of, I would encourage that to the best of our ability.
Mayor?
We can't really have additional conversation about it, I'm afraid, because we've already had the public hearing. So I would encourage action by the council if there's any action to be presented.
Can I follow up on that?
Vice Mayor?
The park owner is not responsible for this. I mean, I hate to say that. I mean, I read through this, the no tree shall be allowed to become a hazard. They're talking about the people who rent the space. Isn't that right?
Well, as I'm looking at the letter that was signed by the representative from Rancho de Napa, as the property owner, I'd be terribly concerned to have that come off on their letterhead, because it states, because this tree is lifting the foundation of your home. I'm not providing any legal advice to anybody, but certainly if I received a letter like that from my property owner, I think the property owner would say, I've got to do something about that.
Okay. Well, they're going to say no, and they're not going to sue them because they can't afford to do it. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
No, but then it may fall into that nuisance situation, and then it's a whole different issue. So I don't want to. I think we're dealing specifically and focusing on this one issue tonight. I don't want to get ahead of the game, if you will, and so whatever action the town.
I'll get back to. Does a member of the council have an action to present? Councilmember Mueller.
So I just think that what I heard from everybody, or the majority of the council, is that we would like to see a letter from a certified arborist regarding the condition of the tree, and then we could bring the item back to the council for review at that time.
So,
and is there any way we could get some clarification about who we really need to be dealing with, or I guess we'll deal with that at that time.
Yeah, if I'm hearing your motion being you are requesting to continue this item until there is an arborist report provided.
I want a certified arborist to give a report.
I have a question.
Well, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second to the motion? First of all,
I'll second the motion.
Okay, now there can be discussion about the motion.
I would like, as part of that motion, that if the applicant is required and not the property owner, that the town look into, because it is in the ordinance that we are able to give some financial assistance to someone to bear the burden of that cost.
That's not the way the ordinance is written, actually. We cited that earlier, that there is financial hardship related to maintaining a tree, not removing a tree.
Well, getting this report is part of maintenance, isn't it?
That's not the application. The application is removal of the tree. So, I mean, you're welcome to make a subsequent motion if you want, or you could ask Councilmember Mueller to change her motion, or there is a motion in the second that's already, if you don't want to make a substitute motion, then we'll vote on the motion that's presented. So did you want to make a substitute motion or not? Or a second, what is it, second motion?
Well, it is a it can be dealt with one of two ways, a request for a friendly amendment to the existing motion or a substitute motion.
I request a friendly amendment to the motion.
Which you're not obligated, both of you would have to agree to that.
Second.
Can I make a comment?
Do you accept her request for that change in your motion?
No, because I'm hoping Rancho Napa is going to pay for this.
So that would be no, that you're not
would be a
willing
no.
to change your
Right,
motion.
right.
So are there any other comments
Hopefully
about the
they're
motion? So
responsible.
the motion has been presented by Councilmember Mueller, seconded by Councilmember Hall. With no further discussion, all in favor of the motion to continue this item until an official arborist report is received?
Certified arborist.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
That passes 4-1. So we will, I would just encourage staff again to expedite the process as quickly as possible to help support the Bundys and their neighbors, as well as the other folks that clearly have this issue coming before us. So thank you all very much, and hopefully we can take care of that efficiently. Next up, now we are going to talk about photovoltaic solar electric panels.
Thank you, Mayor. I enjoyed your counsel.
Thank you.
You're right.
Sorry, we're still in our meeting. I don't mean to be rude, but
I would support you, Mayor.
thank you. So we have consideration of adoption of a resolution regarding photovoltaic panels.
Thank you.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
I'm still looking left.
I like to sit in the back and then just come up when I need to talk.
Okay, let's go.
Well, before you this evening is a resolution that will authorize the town manager to approve a power purchase agreement, or a PPA, with Soled Benefit Corporation, who will install solar panel systems at the wastewater treatment plant, the wastewater pump station, and the community center here in Yountville. This project is part of the CIP project CP6, the townwide photovoltaic system project. Now, a little bit of background. In 2013, staff became aware of a regional grant-funded effort to create a collaborative RFP, or request for proposals, for solar projects in Napa, Marin, and Sonoma counties. The Yountville Town Council authorized staff to participate in the program and evaluate if it would be of any value to the town. As a part of the SEED program, each jurisdiction works with Optany Incorporated, an independent solar consulting firm. And with Optany, the SEED group worked to identify appropriate sites in each community and considered these 3 Yountville sites as good candidates for solar panels. After each community in the SEED program completed this survey of sites, the City of San Rafael agreed to take on the role of coordinating agency. They issued an RFP on behalf of the 13 agencies participating, and eventually elected to go with the vendor team of Sonetric, Soled Benefit Corporation, and Danlin Construction. The town was presented with 3 financing mechanisms in order to pay for this project. One of these options is the PPA, the power purchase agreement, and wherein the town would enter into a service contract to purchase all of the energy produced by the on-site solar panels. The town would not own, operate, or maintain the panels, the equipment itself, but would house them on their property and purchase the energy that it provides in order to offset the current utility bills. The town also had the opportunity to purchase the equipment flat out on the onset, and subsequent payments would be made, of course, for maintenance and insurance and other related operating costs. Then the third option was similar to the second one, though it would be a municipal lease option that would be structured similarly to a loan with annual or monthly payments in a set term. And the town would take on all of the operating and maintenance responsibilities as if the system were purchased outright. In reviewing the financing options, staff determined the PPA option is the most appropriate for Yountville. It requires no upfront costs, and it adopts relatively low risk. In short, the town will purchase the energy at a low rate for 20 to 25 years. Based on the assumptions assumptions made from our current utility payments, overall savings would be about $2.3 million over 25 years, or $1.2 million for a net present value. In August of this year, SolEd stated that they had completed negotiations with the seed group, and an opportunity was created wherein if 2 megawatts are signed by September 30th of this year, so in 2 weeks, then an additional 10% discount will be applied to all the sites. In other words, if Yountville and other communities were able to agree to this by September 30th, and if all the communities combined equal a 2 megawatt system, then we'd receive that discount. And the collective is projected to meet this figure. At this time, the PPA is in a form that allows the town to proceed with individual sites one by one. Each site still needs to go before staff and the ZDRB for final design review. This evening, Council is being asked to approve the resolution to authorize the town manager to sign the PPA agreement so that we may receive that 10% discount and that we can agree to the financing structure that in order to pay for the installation of these solar panels. And representatives Jonathan Whelan from Optany and David Potofsky from Synetric and David Kuhnhart from SolEd are here, as well as staff to answer any questions you may have about this agreement. Thanks.
Questions about the staff report?
I only had.
Or Dornbecker.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry. I only had one question, and that is that in looking at the layout, it looked like the panels in the community center are only over a small area of the parking spaces, and I was wondering what the reasoning behind that is.
In order to get the system size that they're projecting, that would be the most appropriate space, and it would serve, based on this, we still, once again, need to go to design review, but it would be like a covered parking station with the roof.
Just in that
solar
one
panels.
area, though, right?
Correct.
And that's because that's all the power that we need to generate for that building and the building next door.
They can go more into the specifics about that, but that's how.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I was going to ask the town attorney, this is a minor thing. It says SolEd Benefit Corp is a California benefit corporation. What is a California benefit corporation?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the Town Council. There are a variety of ways in which you can form a corporation. Mm-hmm. Public benefit corporation is generally I'm not sure if they've qualified for nonprofit status, but you can in order to seek nonprofit or non-tax status. So even within the nonprofit world, there are the ability to establish as to provide benefit to the public in a quasi-governmental manner.
Are you from them? Okay, well, hold on.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Sorry, we're not finished here.
I will just be ready.
We will be sure to call on one of the three remaining members of the audience
for follow-up questions. In the so we talk about this net present value and the money we save, etc. What's the discount rate? Do we know what the assumed discount rate is, or maybe you all know that? Okay, we'll get back. Then we'll get to that when it comes.
Okay.
8 or 4%.
Questions about the staff report?
I understand. That's a question about the staff report.
For staff.
I didn't know if they knew or not. Arnold, you've read this whole contract?
Yes, I have.
Okay, good, because it's mind-numbing to me.
Yeah. And provided comments.
Maybe they can answer this, but I'll ask you.
Okay.
If SolEd Benefit Corporation goes bust, because there are many, 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 many of these companies out there, and trust me, a bunch of them are going to go bust. What happens to the solar array that is on our property? I assume it gets sold off to somebody else. What are our protections? Does this all go null and void, and now we have somebody else who's got a lien on property that's on our property? What happens?
Actually, that was one of the comments I offered up to Nathan. I'm going to try and quickly.
We included language about that.
I may just take a moment. I'm trying to pull up my email.
He said he has language about that. So you can research, and maybe we'll get to them, and then I'll ask them that question, and you can contest it if you wish.
I'll ask questions that for staff in the interim. Is there any concern about reflectivity or any other kind of unintended impacts, especially with the community center parking lot? Photovoltaics, is that a non-factor these days because of the way material is used?
Based on the initial design, once again, design review hasn't been approved. Based on the initial, that isn't an issue. With the way that it's going to be angled, it doesn't look like it will be reflecting into any residents that are nearby there. But that can be fully addressed upon official design review.
Okay. You're leaning forward.
I can answer a few little questions in that regard, too, because I just went through this 3 weeks ago with the city of St. Helena. The glass is not has a special anti-glare surface, so that there isn't the glare doesn't, you don't see the glare that you used to see from these sort of things.
And in terms of visibility, much lower impact visually, smaller, flatter, all that stuff. That could also be a question to be answered if necessary. Okay. Do we have an attorney?
Well, yes. I mean, the concern that was written, to answer the question, is if the company went out of existence, the property is retained by the town. The obligation to maintain rests with the town. My comment that was offered on the maintenance of the facility, there was language that there was this decommissioning fund that is established, but there was not a corresponding operation or maintenance fund to be established, so that money would be there in the event that the company didn't exist and the town still needed to continue to operate or maintain. Again, I recognize that this is a contract that has been.
So you said an operating maintenance fund is not established, but a decommissioning is?
That is correct. So if the seller fails to continue the operations and there are maintenance issues, the town would need to repair the location.
Okay.
But the language that I'm reading right here in the staff report, the decommissioning fund will be funded beginning partway through year 6.
Correct. That is also
so there's
correct.
Exposure prior to year 6.
That is also correct.
And in subsequent years until it's fully funded.
Yeah, and the other thing I should also note is that the obligation to operate and maintain only exists for the first 10 years.
Okay.
And I have a question.
So, I'm sorry, can you tell me, what section is that? Not the last part you said, but
the previous part?
Yeah.
Try and pull that up. It's the decommissioning is on page 22 of Exhibit 4.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see here.
That's the resolution.
Maintenance of the facility, the system.
Yes. Paragraph 11B.
Could you repeat where to find that?
Yes.
11B.
Attachment 4?
Attachment 6.
Oh, 6. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hall, question?
So, Nathan, I just want to make sure I understand this. So, there's a total of 6 other municipalities that are involved in this process?
I believe there's 13 total.
Oh, 13? 9. Okay, somewhere in the middle. And as I understand your staff report, it says if 2 of these execute by September 30th, then the additional 10% discount will apply to all of them?
If we receive 2 megawatts, so let's say one community has a 0.5 megawatt and another community is a 1 megawatt, and then a third community is another 0.5, the system size, that would reach the 2 megawatt goal. All those who agreed to participate by September 30th would receive that 10% discount.
Okay, that's not necessarily how it's written, but so you're saying we have to be in to participate if they reach the 2 megawatt goal?
Correct.
To reach that, additional 10%?
If Yountville participates or agrees to participate by September 30th, our system size would be attributed to that total conglomerate number.
And what percentage are we of the total? Would we be of the total? Should we participate?
I don't have the most updated figures. They'll be able to provide that when they speak.
Because if we participate, no one else does, then we've rushed a judgment on something that we may or may not be ready to rush judgment to. I'm not predisposing everyone else's conclusion here.
Keep in mind the figures that I presented based on savings that we would receive is as if we do not have the 10% discount.
Understood.
Okay.
Understood.
Mayor, just so I clarify, the operating and maintenance provisions are on page 22. The decommissioning fund is on 25.
Thank you. So did you...
I understand. My question was answered. I think they're going to get me an answer as to what percentage of total Yountville is to this 2 megawatt contribution. Because if we decide to participate and we don't reach the 2 megawatts, then the 10% is non-existent. So we've, again, just to reiterate, we're rushing into something and they may have an answer to whether or not it exists.
The staff report is presenting it without that number.
Understood. I understand that.
So we would actually be accepting potentially without the discount.
Correct. Yeah. We'd have greater return. That's kind of where my question was going. Okay. My other question is, and I don't recall, and I apologize, there's a lot of data, having one of these systems in place, and I know the no capital up front is always a better avenue to go, and it looks like there's a buyout opportunity at some period, maybe 10 years. That said, what about security and panels being stolen, and how are they protected? And I don't know if I don't recall specifically how that's addressed in their documentation, but panels tend to evaporate.
Yeah. Any risk associated with it would fall on the seed group. We would not have ownership.
We don't have, because we wouldn't own it. But after year 10, if we were to make a buyback decision on the solar panels, is there security in place, or would there be security in place? Because implementing those systems can also be of substantial.
If we were to choose in the future to gain ownership of these, then we'd need to think up of some kind of system in order to provide that security. It could be similar to the pre-existing systems that we already have.
And then the last question I have is, and maybe it's addressed specifically, how much of the current power usage in the community center up above and the third one, is this actually going to offset?
It was projected to be about 99%.
Of our power consumption in those facilities?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Rowley, you got a question?
Yeah, I think the biggest question I had is, this is fairly new technology. We're expecting a life cycle of 20 to 25 years. I'm also expecting this technology is going to change quite a bit. So are we protected in case that happens? And leasing this, is that what the concept is? We're going to lease this for 10 years. If something new, better comes out that's, 1/1000th of the size or something, we can switch this out and get the newer technology?
Language like that isn't in the agreement that I've seen.
Well, we'll wait. I think there's somebody there with lots of information waiting to get to this podium. All right, thanks. That's my question.
And I had the same question, so I will certainly look forward to that answer. Any other questions of the staff report before we hear from our guests? Just want to make sure. Okay. I think it's time that we can have whichever one of you is going to come first.
And you're going to open the public hearing?
Oh, yes. I forgot. This is a public hearing, so I will go ahead and open the public hearing and invite, I guess I'll call it our applicants. Yes.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Jonathan Whalen with Optany and the Seed Fund, and so we are working as the town's consultant on this matter. So, we're happy to be here in front of you. As Mr. Steele mentioned, this has been in the works since actually even before 2013, since even March of 2012 is when the Seed Fund received an initial grant from the California Solar Initiative to pursue collaborative procurement just like this. So we're happy to be at this point. To address some of the questions, and I'm certainly happy to answer more. The folks behind me are the vendors here, and so they're able to speak to a lot of the details probably better than I can. As far as the layout of the community center and the recreation hall, you're exactly right. That it was sized to go over part of that parking area because you really don't need any more than that. So no need to do that. As far as what the benefit corporation is, I'll leave that to Mr. Kuhnhart to speak to, as he knows best. The NPV analysis was done. If you look at the cash flow statements towards the bottom, you can see that there are two different discount rates used. One is at 4%, one's at 8%. So you've got a couple different options to see, as well as the gross cash returns with no discount rate applied.
I'm sorry, on the...
so on the cash flow statements...
Attachment 3.
Sorry, yes. Towards the bottom, you can see in the boxes there, the two lowest rows of the two bottom boxes. I know, I'm sure the writing is very tiny, but...
So when you're so when you're referring to the NPV of savings at 4%, you're referring to the 4% as not a 4% savings, but a 4% discount rate.
At a 4% discount rate, exactly. I'll let Soled speak to what happens if they go away, but the general idea is exactly right. If Soled were to go away, they're partnering with major financing institutions to finance this project. Corporations like Bank of America, U.S. Bank, Wells Fargo are going to be partnered. Someone like that is going to be partnered with this. If Soled were to go away, the financing partner would take full responsibility and ownership of that system. So they would be responsible for continuing to own and maintain the system and provide the energy to the town. And you'd have to remember that the only way they get paid back on their loan that they make to finance this project would be by selling that energy to the town. So they've got a very strong vested interest in picking up that maintenance. If for whatever reason they didn't do that, then the town would take ownership of the system and it would essentially have a free solar system.
So, I'm sorry, can you reference in the agreement where it says that we would take ownership at that point?
I can't. I'll try to pass that off to one of the gentlemen behind me. I'm not sure if they've got the agreements on hand, but...
Okay, I do.
But yes, and I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me. Reflectivity, the question there, I think, is there going to be glare there? These have been approved by FAA for being located on and at and near airports. So the glare-resistant glass, the anti-glare coating on the modules really cuts down. All the sunlight is intended to be kept within the module. That's how the modules work, is they capture the sunlight. So they want to reflect as little as possible. And you can think of it as being less reflective than the windshields that would be there from parked cars. O&M, the decommissioning fund funded at year 6.5. I guess I can let Soled speak to that. O&M, I know that came up a little bit. While the system is owned, while you're under the power purchase agreement and the system is owned by the vendor, there is no O&M obligation by the town at all. You don't take care of those modules, you don't wash them, you don't do anything. They do that completely for you. And that's for the 20-year term of the PPA. There are buyout options at years 7, 15, and 20, as you mentioned. And at that point, if you were to exercise those options, then you would have to take on that responsibility of ownership of operations and maintenance. You could hire the vendor or a third party to do that O&M for you. 13 agencies are included. Actually, it has grown to 14 because City of Cloverdale was a late entry, but they've come on board. The question about the 2 megawatts needed, the total that's been proposed for the town of Yountville is about 289 kilowatts, so that's about 14% of that 2 megawatt total. Right now, we've gotten council approval from City of San Rafael, City of Mill Valley, City of St. Helena, and then we've also gotten board approval from the Sonoma County Employees Retirement Association, and that total is about 1.8 megawatts. So actually, the town of Yountville would push us over that 2 megawatt level, if that helps. And if I'm doing all my math correctly, but I believe I am. Security, I can leave to the folks behind me. I believe that there are options for secure fasteners, so that even if so Mr. Steele is correct. As so long as the system is owned by the vendor, their risk is theft is at their risk. If you were to buy this system, then it would be at your risk, but you can address that beforehand by requiring secure fasteners, and I believe that's included in the PPA engineering and design and engineering requirements. Beyond that, the energy, Mr. Steele addressed that, looking to offset close to 98, 99, 100% of the energy bills at each of these locations. It's anywhere between 64 to 70, anywhere between 64 to 70% of the energy usage at each of those sites. But because you're able to take advantage of times of use and net metering, you're able to actually offset almost all of your bill without even needing to offset almost all your energy. And then the last question about technology changes, I'll leave that for one of the folks behind me to speak to. Yeah, please.
I do have one more question that you may pass off. I'm still kind of focused on this community center parking lot array. How high is that array? I know we see length and width. I'm curious about the height.
The minimum height would be 10 feet, 10'6", right around that area, enough for passenger vehicles to park underneath. They wouldn't be higher for like what you might see at a bus yard or at a corporation yard, which would require a higher clearance for maintenance vehicles.
So my concern is we have not only trash waste pickup that drives all the way around that, as well as fire trucks and other, whether they be staff vehicles or other vehicles that are higher than that. So are we sure that there's clearance here?
That can definitely be worked out, but it should be yes. All of these modules that I've seen in the design are over parking spaces only. There's no overhang, or at least not much overhang, into the driveway at all. Yeah, the drive house.
So there may be a restriction on an oversized delivery vehicle. We get people dropping off things for special events at the community center that park back there. They would not be able to pull into a parking space potentially.
Potentially. Of course, there are other spaces that are not covered, but potentially.
Okay. Then thank you for your comments, and whichever one of you has flipped the coin to go first. There you go.
Okay.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Member and Town Council members, and thank you for all of your work. David Kuhnhart, Soled Benefit Corporation. First, to the question of what exactly is a benefit corporation, and I don't blame anyone for having an infirm idea, because it's a new category. Beginning on January 1st, 2012, in California, there was a new category of corporation invented. It is a for-profit corporation with no special tax advantages, but it lives by a mission. So we're kind of a hybrid of a C Corp and a nonprofit. Nonprofits are referred to as public benefit organizations. We are a benefit corporation, and so we are recorded in the Secretary of State's office in our articles of incorporation that we are a benefit corporation serving the goal of reducing the lifetime cost of clean energy for public benefit organizations, such as yours. And there are now 27 states that have benefit corporations, and it's a growing movement. And you will, I guarantee you, in the next 2 weeks, you'll hear something more about a benefit corporation out there in the world. Even Delaware has benefit corporations. Now,
into Ireland.
I wanted to say two things about Soled and what we've done, and the question was also asked by the mayor of Mill Valley just before their unanimous vote. What happens if Soled goes bust, because there are a lot of solar companies that go bust. We have done what I think is the best thing for the town by saying that these systems will be owned actually by a bankruptcy remote LLC, that is Soled Solar Holdings 1 LLC, and that's in the PPA document, of which Soled Benefit Corporation is managing member. So we can go away. That means 1% of Soled Solar Holdings 1 LLC goes away, and the other 99% stays in place. And we did that both for you and for the financing sources, because the financing sources want to know that if something happens with the manager, if they don't like the manager, if whatever happens, that they have the ability to pull us out and put one of their favored asset managers in place to keep their value going and growing. And I don't think you'll find ready reference to what happens if we stop doing our job, except in the default provision. So if you look up the word default in the agreement, you'll see that ultimately if we fail and fail and fail and fail, and our financing sources don't stand up and protect their own very real interests, then ultimately default can result in you taking that equipment. It's not something that we have as a high feature item in our agreement because we don't expect to fail either ourselves or our partners. But in that, it is not a lease. It's a service agreement. And it's very specifically a service agreement in which you're only obligated to buy the clean energy. That's your only obligation. It is our obligation to do everything else. And so if we stop functioning, and the system winds down or doesn't function very well, you only pay for the clean energy you get. There's no lease obligation. There's no regular payment obligation. There's no way for the town to be trapped in being responsible for the financing obligation. On the question of lien, there is specific language, and I don't think I can pull out of my head the paragraph, but in the financing section, it says unequivocally, we are not allowed to lien your property, and our financing sources are not allowed to lien your property. And frankly, they don't have any motive to, because the thing that's most valuable about this system, well, it's good quality equipment, and it should last for 30 years. But it's the payment, it's the contract that has value. It's your being happy with the contract that has value. It's the continuing source of income to that holdings LLC that has value. And so anybody who takes our place is going to want to maintain that and maintain the equipment well enough so that they can keep that income stream coming their way. The other thing that I wanted to say about, the changes in the solar industry is that one of the great changes in the solar industry is that there are a whole bunch of companies now that are asset buyers. It's from family funds to pure asset managers to O&M providers who are eager to operate solar facilities, small, medium, and large. And they're buying them, and there's a secondary market of these things, and that we're in fact tapping directly into that secondary market for our upfront financing. And so there are a lot of parties. There may not be a lot of really good developers, and in fact I have to admit there aren't a lot of good PPA providers. We think of ourselves as having a very good idea about how to do that, but there are a lot and growing number of renewable energy asset buyers out there. So just a fact of life. I think that I've covered most of what I could, and David has a few pieces that he wants, unless there's anything else that you want of me.
Any questions at this point?
Yes.
Councilmember Mullen first.
Again, maybe I missed it, but the technology, as it changes, and I expect that it will. I can't imagine over 20 to 25 years something isn't. What are your thoughts towards that? Are you going to, when things change, you'll take this equipment out because you really want us just to buy the clean energy and replace it?
What I would like you to do is continue to use this well-functioning Oldsmobile for its entire life, if you will. It doesn't matter whether or not it's whether there's something else that has higher efficiency or some other better feature to it, as long as we're doing what your question got to, providing offset to 99% of the bill and 80% or so of the energy need, then the same equipment is going to function for 30 years plus. If you had a change and you decided you're going to have a new grow light facility inside of one of your public buildings and really increase your amount of energy use in one of your public buildings, then you we would like to talk to you about the latest, very efficient technology that could use whatever remaining space, or in fact replacing our space. It's conceivable that something would be such a major change and so much better value that we would voluntarily change it, but that would be on us, because again, you're not paying for the equipment, we are. You're not paying for a lease or a mortgage, we are. You're just paying for the clean energy, the electrons that are delivered, the kWh that's delivered. It's really not the same as computers. And the opportunity costs, I mean, there's nothing more that you can get if you're just buying electrons and you're only using so many kilowatt hours at any given site.
I guess it just came, since we're using the computers as an example, they used to, when I was in school, fill this whole room. Now they fit in my pocket.
And
so I would like to have all this energy, but I would like not to see it. So that's really where my question was coming from. I want the new model in 7 to 10 years that you really don't see, because it's like, tucked away behind a bush or something. That's where I was coming from. That's what my vision of the future is.
Cold fusion in a box like this, yes.
I kind of believe in cold fusion, so.
Any other questions right now? Well, I think we have a third presenter who's sat through all this.
I'm David Potofsky. I work with Sunetric. We're the developer of the project. We were the lead in responding to the RFP. We're also the construction company. There were just a couple of questions left, and I'm happy to take anything else that you might have. So the height of the carport is typically 10 feet on the low side. It will be tilted to the southwest, I believe, if I am oriented correctly. And it will not be in the drive aisle at all. So there's a legal drive aisle. I believe it's typically 20 feet, and we'll have to work with planning on that. So it will only cover the car spaces. If there's something wider than that, then we will have to work through that, but that's typically what they are. Then there's a high side, which is almost 14 feet because it is tilted. Let's see here. We talked about the discount we're almost there, and I believe there are 5 council meetings next week, so we expect to actually exceed it and go up to 3 megawatts. So if you were to vote tonight, you would be there. You would be at the 10%. And also, if you weren't to vote tonight, the discount doesn't go away. It actually goes down to 8%. I believe it's by November, and down all the way till December, where it's 5%. So you are not absolutely compelled. It is just the best deal is by September 30th. And frankly, if you were to look at the cash flows, they're excellent without the discount. On the technology piece, I get it. Everybody wants the latest, greatest, and it's really, again, to reiterate, this is a service contract, and so it would be quite difficult financially, because we've projected out the income from this to tear it down and put it back in. I would love it. I'm a techie, but I also have 11-year-old solar panels on my roof that are doing exactly what they were predicted to do. So and all of this energy is guaranteed. So if we were to experience a failure, obviously we would replace it with the latest, greatest. But this is tried and true technology. It's actually, crystalline technology is 40, 50 years old. And some panels that my former company installed are still up and working 30 years later. And they're in Borrego Springs, California, which is probably one of the harshest environments on the planet, and they're still actually producing. So that's it on the technology. And then one thing that wasn't touched on is that you will own the carbon. So there are some possibly, there's AB 32, which actually talks about you reducing your carbon. And then there are the environmental benefits. And so these will belong to you no matter whether you buy it, whether you do the PPA, whether you do the lease. And and those are quantified by the EPA in cars taken off the road, trees planted. This is science. So it is definitely something that if you're looking at this, and if I haven't quantified it already, I certainly can. We have an EPA calculator, and it's a big impact. So, any questions on the technology or the construction?
Questions? I think we're good for now. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your comments. Seeing no other public, I'll close the public hearing. And
Can I ask? I want to go back and ask a question.
Oh, you want to revisit, so I won't close the public hearing
Thank you.
quite yet. Vice Mayor? To whom do you have a question?
My question's for the Sol-Ed gentleman. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name.
David, 2 out of 3 of us are Davids.
Yeah.
Thank you, David. Just to clarify, because I think I heard 2 different things and just trying to digest this contract. It does say in here, I'm on the attachment 6, section 16A, ownership, option to purchase. It says ownership of the system. The seller shall be the legal and beneficial owner of the system at all times and remain the personal property of the seller. I don't see anything in here that says if you don't perform, if we terminate, that it doesn't become ours.
Section 6 is
16.
Yeah,
purchase power agreement.
16 or 6? Are you 6.1 or 6-1 or paragraph 16 of the base in section 4, if you will, exhibit 4? If it's paragraph 16, then it's got to be exhibit 4, I believe.
Okay, we refer to it as attachment 6 in our thing. So I think it talks about the ownership of the system.
Ownership, option to purchase.
Yeah,
right. And
so all I want to clear up is
there'll be another section which talks about defaults, and there's a section on purchaser defaults and seller defaults, and it's the section on seller defaults that I was referring to. And I'm sorry that I don't have my computer open.
That's okay. What I don't see in any of this is. I don't see in the default section, which I see under 13B, maybe there's a different one that talks about the seller default. I don't see that this ever becomes our property. Those panels ever become ours.
Yeah.
You've got banks who want that back.
Well, they do, and that is part of their security. As I say, the PPA agreement is their bigger part of their security, but the panels ultimately are also. And if a town decided to stop paying, well, then the recourse would be for someone to go grab the panels, and we have the right under the agreement to go grab the panels and take them and try to use them somewhere else. Used panels really aren't very valuable for a number of different reasons. But if it's not functioning, you don't really want it either. And so maybe that's why San Rafael and Optany didn't bargain too hard for the right to take over the ownership. But we'll find it. But I think if you look into the default provisions, you'll see ultimately you have the right to take over management and care and so forth if we're not doing our job on that front. And I think Jonathan spoke to this adequately, but I just want to make sure that it's clear, because one piece of the agreement which Council referred to is not particularly clear, and that is 6.1. It was the last thing to be added, and it describes really the contract between us and Synetric, and we do have to require Synetric to give us a 10-year offer to provide O&M in 6-1. And so the language about us getting an offer, the offerer has to provide 10 years, that's in the contract to build, and we're going to have a workmanship warranty and at least a 10-year O&M contract, but it's our responsibility to do operations, maintenance, and insurance for the whole time that we're in contract with you. No question at all. It's our, and by the way, it's also operations and maintenance is between 5 and 10% of the total income from you. And so it's not like it's on a real estate property, it's not like it's 50 or 60% of the cost of the income source. It's only 5 or 10% of the income source. And so that'll help you sort of think about that issue of O&M and whether or not it needs to be reserved. In fact, all of the financing always comes with sufficient debt service coverage ratio to allow for essentially more than twice the normal cost of operations and maintenance. And operations and any debt service comes after operations and maintenance, and insurance is all taken care of.
You made the comment that California benefit corporations have been around for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Does that mean your company's been around for 2.5 years or less?
Less. We were not one of the very first to come into play. I personally been in solar for 7 years and was with a company that provided about 30 megawatts, over $250 million of solar for Arizona State University, the University of California, San Diego, Fresno Airport, 19 Safeway stores, a Lagunitas school, which David and we built together, a group of others. So we've been at it for a while, and I could tell you more, but I don't want to bore you and extend the meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that it for the public hearing now? I think.
That's all.
Thank you. I will now close the public hearing and invite additional council discussion or action. I'll start to my right this time. Councilmember Dornbecker, any thoughts?
Well, I'm very much in support of this project, and I intend to support it.
Councilmember Hall.
That was pretty short. Good. In general, I support these kinds of projects. I think that there's obviously, to be clear, we have a very large solar array at the property where I work. We've seen the payback, but we own the asset, and so we take full advantage. We also got a lot of federal money back in the process of building it, so this was several years ago when there was real money to get back from the federal government from doing that. That said, these are good opportunities. It doesn't ever do much good to go out and test all the assumptions that have been put on the paper. I think a 4% assumption on utility rates is maybe reasonable. I don't know. I mean, I can't tell you what PG&E is going to do to all of us, but I can tell you that it's not going to go down. That said, what this does also provide for our residents here, when we get down to brass tacks, is that if we can reduce the cost of power at the wastewater plant, which this would greatly do, I would assume that in some form or fashion we would see the ability to hold or manage our rates that are going out to our customers. And today they are currently seeing significant increases, and that's something that I think this council thinks is important to try to control and manage, because they're the people that are sitting up here that are paying those bills. That said, I feel comfortable with it. These are very complex structures and organizations. I've never heard of this kind of structure and an entity. I would have asked, how do you get paid? But I think you tried to articulate that, because if you're not getting paid, then I think towards the vice mayor's questioning what happens when you don't, and then you wind up, and then where do we end up? But it seems like it's been at least reviewed by the town attorney, and there are other municipalities involved, so I can feel reasonably comfortable supporting it. I don't know, because I didn't really see or do the measurements, whether the PPA is better than purchasing and owning the assets outright, but then there's more risk on us and less risk on you, and that's not something I'm interested in putting onto the town at this juncture. Thank you.
Councilmember Mueller.
I'm also in support of this project. I certainly appreciate the staff time that went into this. I'm assuming you sorted through a lot of different entities and a lot of different ways to go. After we said we want some solar here in town, there was a lot of different avenues you could take, and so I trust that staff has picked a good one for us, but it seems like things don't work out. I certainly am comfortable with the different outs we have, and we will have something measurable in terms of our electricity. So I guess I still think that there's going to be a lot more progress in this area, so I'm hoping to see something change in the future, and I think you guys might be there. So I think it's good. I think, as Councilmember Hall said, I'm really looking forward to this having a big impact, hopefully, on our wastewater treatment plant and our pump station. We're getting more and more regulatory requirements from the state, which drives our prices up, and everyone's using less energy, and these things I think will help contain some of those costs. So I think that I'm certainly in support. We'll give it a shot, and it's got enough outs for me, so feel comfortable moving forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Vice Mayor.
Well, I'll ask one last question of the town attorney. You made the comment, Arnold, of it was one of the things you said, feedback. I always get nervous about things that are so new and signing 30-year contracts on things that we can't look back and say, well, this is the experience over time. Are you comfortable with what you see in general?
Yes, I am. I mean, again, this has been, I think, flushed out by a number of attorneys from a number of jurisdictions, and I'm sure everybody's provided their comments. While we, the town, have not, we were kind of receiving this contract as the product of a number of other reviews. There was nothing that stood out in my mind that said, well, wait a minute, the town is at significant risk. So I'm comfortable with it.
Okay, thank you. Well, it helps me feel comfortable with it. I think my first reaction always when somebody comes and says, here, let me just give you free money, is I'm skeptical. I think there's one thing that probably does need to be recognized is the technology alone. I always ask myself, why does PG&E, I know they have legacy assets and billions of dollars distributed. We're getting, you got it at your employer, tremendous tax advantages and subsidies from various levels of government. That's why this makes sense. It's not because it's magical yet and it produces energy at a crazy rate. That's why it hasn't taken over. There's a tremendous amount of money coming from other sources that's not the town of Yountville to make this work. So I think that's mostly taken care of at the front end when it's constructed, and I think that's what it was for you guys. I assume that's what's happening over here. And someday this may all blow up, but probably the contract will be there and the asset will be there and we'll be fine. So that's why I am comfortable, because I think you lock it in now. And if the tax situation, the subsidy situation changes because the state and federal government are bankrupt, which they are, then all bets could be off down the road. So I do support it. I think it's good for Yountville.
Thanks. I go back to one of the first lines that was brought up, low cost and low risk for the town with the PPA. And that makes me a little more comfortable. I share some of that concern about signing anything for decades. But I'm comfortable. I've been supporting our efforts to find alternative energy sources and more affordable energy opportunities. I think this is one of them. Mildly concerned about the impacts to the community center area, just from the physical change. But I think that's a reasonable place. If you are ever out there in the afternoon, it's a very good solar source, or at least location. I think we are going to continue to be challenged by the state about our carbon emissions, energy efficiencies, and if this is going to help us achieve those goals, and on top of it, provide the opportunities in the future for the town and the residents of Yountville to potentially either save money or at least control the costs of energy, then this is going to be worth it for us. So I do get some comfort in the fact that there are many municipalities that have vetted this, bigger with probably more at risk than us. So if this is one of those situations where we're able to take advantage of that group effort, then I'm supportive of that. Thanks, Nathan, and to any other staff members that helped make sense of all this, because it's still complicated and very detailed, and I thank you for bringing forward all the options and information to us. I'm hearing some
I would like to make a motion.
Councilmember Dornbecker, I think, is ready to make a motion. Am I right?
Yes, please.
That's what I thought I heard.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve resolution number 3203-14, authorizing the town manager to execute site-specific power purchase agreements for solar voltaic PV projects on 3 town sites, including the Yountville Wastewater Treatment Plant, Yountville Community Center, Yountville Pump Station, and facilities with Sol Ed Benefit Corporation.
Second.
Is that sufficient reading of that? Okay. Okay. So, motion Dornbecker, second by Hall. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Thank you all very much. I think it's one of those things where when the town manager misses a meeting, we authorize him to enter into this significant
He's got a lot of authority
contract.
in his absence.
Mr. Mayor, just a quick question. One of the conditions is a review by zoning. Is there a sense of the timing of
We'll be
that?
able to talk tomorrow. I'll set up a follow-up meeting with that.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
We're going to move ahead. I know we're getting quite late in the hour. Our next item, administrative item, is single-use carry-out bag reduction discussion. I know that there are some neighboring municipalities that have been taking some action, and this is also an issue on the governor's desk right now. So we asked staff to bring this topic forward.
Good evening. So I thought I'd fill you in on some recent local activity and the action at the state level. And SB 270 was approved by the Senate last month, and as the mayor mentions, it sits on the governor's desk for signature. The three key provisions of SB 270 are that it would create a phased-in approach for the ban of single-use plastic bags, first at grocery stores, then at other retailers and convenience stores. It would apply a 10-cent fee for the use of a recyclable paper bag at these stores, and it would limit a local jurisdiction from implementing a local ban that's more restrictive than the state ban. We know that in Napa, before SB 270 was approved by the Senate, that the city of Napa approved a model ordinance, and it applies more broadly to retailers than the state ban. Pretty much applies to all retail. The city of St. Helena has also enacted an ordinance, a slight modification of the Napa ordinance, and it exempts the 10-cent fee for recyclable bags for more the boutique retailer and those that use special logo gift bags. So the other jurisdictions in Napa haven't yet adopted a local ordinance, and their ability to do so may be constrained by this bill if it's signed by the governor. So we're bringing this to you as an informational item, and then also to provide an opportunity to do any of the alternatives on page 2 of the staff report, and that is to take no action and maintain the status quo, to wait for the statewide legislation, or to consider adopting a local ordinance, and that would be in consideration of perhaps the state ordinance not passing and there being an opportunity to create an ordinance at a local level.
Okay, and having discussed this briefly with the town attorney before the meeting tonight, and just to follow up on what you were just saying, to clarify, this being on the governor's desk right now, he can either sign it into law, he can take no action, which results in it being enacted into law since it's passed both houses, or he could veto it. And you had an update on when that decision would be made.
Mayor, members of the town council, and that's correct. The mayor has those three options. If the governor does not sign or veto the law before September 30th, the law goes into effect. If the governor vetoes the bill, obviously it does not become law unless it's overturned or by a 2/3 majority of the respective houses. I went on the governor's website tonight. As of today, the close of business today, he did not take any action on that bill and did not release any statement of whether or not he intends to.
Okay, thank you. Just a little add-on, last-minute add to the staff report. Any questions of what is being presented to us? So we're not being requested any formal action necessarily, but is there any direction that council would like to share with staff about intentions? Because I know that just a little bit more background, I think staff and the council have been monitoring this situation, and since we've been seeing several other jurisdictions tackle this, it certainly was my intention to let some other staff in other jurisdictions take on the time and cost of the research, and especially since we knew that the county was already looking at an ordinance that would potentially trump anything we did locally, and certainly the state ordinance would at this point trump anything that we do locally. So I think there have been some fairly significant changes since this issue first came up, and I know it was brought to us earlier this year, but there have been a lot of issues vetted to get to some of these terms that are being presented now and that have been enacted in a couple of our neighboring jurisdictions. So with that background, Councilmember Mueller, you had some comments?
Well, I just wanted to make a general comment to the public. I mean, I think we've heard from a few people in the public there's a perception that we're not doing anything, and that really isn't correct. For one, I've been serving on the Environmental Quality Committee for the California League of Cities for maybe 4 years now. I can't remember exactly. And we've spent probably a year and a half working very closely with all the wording in SB 270, monitoring very closely. The league has been spending money on lobbyists, and we've been very supportive of this bill. There has been some modifications, but it's really taken a long time to get a lot of buy-in from a lot of different groups, and I've always felt that it was going to pass, and it would be best and probably the easiest that we just let, as we do with many other things, let the state, approve this and follow along with that instead of recreating the wheel. There's really nothing unique about Yountville that would drive us to having a different bill than what the state has. So, and people, I think it will. There's every indication that the governor is going to sign this. He was just really busy with a lot of stuff doing the underground water thing that he just signed today about not letting everyone pull out underground water all over the place. So, and he's running for re-election. So I'm very confident this is going to pass, and I think it's going to serve Yountville well for our particular needs. And the county has not passed their own measure, FYI.
Councilmember Hall?
Yes, I think that in general, having some policy or ordinance around this in Yountville is consistent with how we've tried to at least lead or govern this community, although we're not a large jurisdiction that has lots of these types of activities. We don't have grocery stores per se other than the ranch market, and that usage is not like having one Whole Foods or Safeway in your town or community. So our impact is relatively minimal on that. However, I do feel strongly about this type of proposal. I know that we've had presentations from local residents as well to this council, and I think we all feel reasonably comfortable that the direction the state is going is consistent. I did have a question, and that is, I think I understood that if we were to recommend that staff go out and help prepare or do analysis to put forward an ordinance or something that we could pass or a resolution we could put forward, if it was to be more strict than what the state would theoretically authorize based on what's currently on the governor's desk, it would be superseded by state rule. Is that correct?
Correct.
That is, well, because there was not one adopted by, I believe it was September 1st.
So that's
the first reading had to occur by September 1st.
Right.
Okay.
Right, that is correct.
So at this juncture,
so we're preempted. The local agencies are preempted by state law.
Right. Then, following that line of reasoning and that we weren't proactive or more proactive in getting something done in advance, not because of lack of motion or activity, but because of necessity, frankly, I would feel comfortable defaulting to what the presumed state outcome is going to be. However, that said, should it be vetoed or should there be some other action that would cause it to not be put forward, I think that this council should revisit that, and staff should be prepared to put together some sort of ordinance or resolution for us to take action on should that fall by the wayside. And that would be my feelings. And I would be very, very strict. Yes.
Councilmember Dornbecker?
I agree with Councilmember Hall. If the governor vetoes this bill and it doesn't take effect, then I really want us to act on our own. But I do believe that it will be signed into law, and I'm glad to see it for the whole state and for our town.
Vice Mayor?
Well, staff should certainly not do anything before this is taken up. And I guess at our next council meeting, we'll get an update on that. I'm not as enthusiastic, but I don't think that's going to matter.
Yeah, I think it's more symbolic, a position that if we had taken a position prior to this, I know folks would like to have seen that, but I think that would have been premature for us. That's one of the restrictions we have with such a small staff to be researching things at a state and federal level while it's already being handled at those levels and likely to impact us anyway. I don't know that would have been very appropriate for us to use our resources in that regard. This boils down to principally one business in Downfield that's going to be impacted because the majority of the others are going to be exempt. So the physical impact of this law in Downfield will probably be fairly minimal, but certainly can support the symbolic impact of us doing the right thing for the environment. Even though, again, there are a couple of these conditions that are burdens either on the retailer needing to comply with charging that separate 10 cents per bag and some of the other impacts on other vendors. So as Vice Mayor said, it may be out of our hands in a matter of days, so we'll revisit this and see. I'd like to see staff bring an update to our October meeting. We'll all have heard about it by then, but still, if we need to take any kind of action.
I think it's also going to be interesting and important that the state does this, because now the state will have jurisdiction over the veterans' home and their use of the plastic bags up there. Because if we put our own in, we would have to be monitoring that situation because they're in our town limits. So I think overall this is a much cleaner way to go.
Okay. There's not really much direction to give you at this point, but thank you for the information and the update. Next up, California State Water Resources Control Board drought regulations.
Yes. Good evening, Council. Before you this evening is a staff report and resolution regarding emergency regulatory action for water conservation. In its February 4th meeting of this year, Council implemented Phase 1 water emergency regulations and approved the water use efficiency plan for the town of Yountville. Because of this action, town staff has issued a series of public education outreach materials to residents and also the business community in order to encourage water-saving behavior. Partially due to the outreach being done by town staff and also by state outreach, water usage within the town of Yountville was down this July compared to last July by about 22%. And this is slightly better than the state's overall goal of 20%. Now, in July of this year, the State Water Resource Control Board, the state board, submitted new regulations as a response to the drought that went into effect statewide on July 28th. During our August council meeting, council requested staff to prepare an update on these new requirements. The state board identified 4 specific activities that would be prohibited statewide. These 4 activities include overwatering of outdoor landscape, so it causes runoff, using a hose without a shutoff nozzle in order to wash a vehicle, using potable water to clean driveways and sidewalks, spraying off asphalt, and using potable water in a fountain that doesn't circulate. Now, although these are new restrictions that the state has adopted to be violations statewide, they have always been prohibited in the Yountville Municipal Code in Section 1320. Now, the other mandate that came from the board relates to requirements of water suppliers. Yountville is a water supplier, and suppliers the size of Yountville are now required to do one or both of the following. we can either limit outdoor irrigation to 2 days a week or implement other measures that reduce water consumption. As stated earlier, because July's water consumption figures are lower than last July's, Yountville is already in compliance with this mandate. And so staff has attached a resolution to formally state that the town is in compliance with the state board's new mandates, and staff recommends that the council approves the resolution to state that compliance, and staff is available for any questions.
Thank you. Questions about the staff report from anyone?
So,
Vice Mayor?
you said that we state we're already in compliance. Do we still have to do one or both of the following that you listed?
The resolution is stating that we are doing one or both of the following,
Okay, that's what I
which
thought.
is reduce consumption from last year.
Additional question? Are you looking?
So are we saying that we're already in compliance with that?
That's what the resolution is stating.
So are we limiting outdoor irrigation to no more than 2 days a week?
Nope.
No. We can do one or both of those two requirements, and since we are already doing one of those by reducing our consumption, we're already in compliance.
We've implemented other measures.
Correct.
So we're not really changing anything.
We're sort of patting ourselves on the back.
Stating that the compliance is official. So has staff been monitoring business practices that I think you just said have been technically illegal since prior to this drought, of restaurants hosing down mats and people hosing down driveways and walkways and such?
Yeah, based on Section 1320, town is already authorized to potentially fine anyone that is doing one of those four options, among others. Staff has already, through public education as well as direct contact, different water users that may be in violation in order to have them to stop that, though we have not fined anyone yet.
And knowing how this stuff tends to work, like you stated in here that the state's already changed its requirements since we started trying to comply. Are we then going to come up against health and safety issues that people aren't allowed to properly cleanse their restaurant material and other? I mean, that's what it feels like, that we're trying to save water and do the right thing there, and we're going to create a health and safety issue by telling businesses they can't properly clean their stuff.
Yeah. As of right now, we aren't implementing any kind of procedure that would put us at risk for health and safety issues. Right now, it's things like hosing off a patio when a broom or a leaf blower would be able to accomplish the same work.
Okay. I don't mean to.
I'm going to dwell on that.
All right. Vice Mayor?
Now, you just gave a different example than what we talked about before, because it says using potable water on driveways and sidewalks, a patio outside of a restaurant. I mean, if you're saying that our current ordinances say you cannot use water,
we are authorized to fine.
How are we supposed to clean a sidewalk in front of a restaurant with no water?
A broom or a blower is what I think I heard.
We mop the inside of our floor in a house, but people spill stuff outside or on a sidewalk, and we're supposed to. I don't get it. I mean, I didn't know that was our law, first of all, because some of us hire people to come out and steam clean and do all that kind of thing. So I guess when I do that's not legal.
This is in order to monitor water waste. Of course, if there is a stain of some kind, yes, we're able to use some water in order to get the stain out. But when it's the basic, there's some dirt on the sidewalk, it wouldn't be appropriate to use a hose in order to do that when a broom would be able to accomplish the same thing.
I think what I'm hearing is that we have that ordinance in place to have the mechanism to find someone who's an abuser. Correct. And we also have the discretion to not find someone who is operating in an acceptable manner, almost forgiving that behavior.
I'll ask, I guess, not tonight, but a different time if somebody can walk me through that and show me the code, but not tonight.
Is there a motion to be had on this resolution?
I'll make
Councilor Mueller?
a motion that we adopt resolution number 3151-14, which implements Phase 1 water emergency regulations and approve water use efficiency plan.
Second.
All right, motion Mueller, seconded by Hall. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, I learned something today. Do we have any staff informational reports? Debbie's frantically reaching for a staff informational report. Here's your chance.
Best answer.
First impressions.
Say no.
You might notice when we leave, well, you probably noticed when you came into town today and maybe yesterday that Caltrans had put up some detour signs through the middle of town. They're doing some dig out work out on 29, directly adjacent to the town streets over the next 2 nights, and they're going to be directing traffic from the highway through town and back out onto the highway in both, going northbound, they'll be coming off at California Boulevard and merging back in as Washington merges back into the highway, and going southbound, they'll be coming off at California and running down Solano. And I believe they go back on at Hoffman. So that will happen the next 2 nights through town, and then Thursday night they're planning on working on they should be finishing up the Madison intersection and putting in the loops, the electronics that sense the cars, and that should finish up the work directly adjacent to the town. They're going to be working for the next month or so between Yountville and Napa. From 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning. And we tried to talk them into waiting to their detours until 9 p.m. tonight and tomorrow night so that the diners could finish. And
well, hopefully they're all staying in town and don't need to get back on the highway. Thank you. Any other informational reports? Seeing no others, I know there were a few of us that went to the League of California Cities annual conference. I don't know that any of these other meetings have been held this month because
mine has.
Kind of 'tis the month to cancel meetings. So, Councilor Moe, do you have a very brief report? Very briff.
I would
report.
Really want to do it brief, but it's got some pretty big numbers in there, so I thought it was important to kind of bring it up. This is the report for the Upper Valley Waste Management Authority. First, a clarification. I think you might have seen it in the newspaper that St. Helena is suing UVDS, but it's actually the Upper Valley Recycling, which is one of the companies, but not in our JPA. So, and then our JPA covers the waste management, the dump, and the recycling up there, but not the official recycling. Anyway, they are expanding the facilities up there, and also especially the recycling center and some in-vessel food waste composting and increasing some other storage for recycling. And why I'm bringing that up is that that's going to cost $3 million. Right now they have filed grants for all of that, and this is primarily to meet the county's AB 32 greenhouse gas initiatives. And so we've agreed not to talk about it until next month. If the grants don't come through, who's going to pay the $3 million? There's also a $5.5 million biomass conversion facility they want to build, but they think they might be able to use public-private money for that, whatever that means. So just when if something comes up and rates go up a lot, I will keep you posted. I'm on top of it. So
okay. Thank you. Any other meeting reports specifically?
Well, I was going to talk about the League of California Cities.
Feel free. Go ahead. A brief review of the conference.
September 3rd, 4th, and 5th, I attended the League of California Cities annual conference. I attended several sessions, including panels on sustainability, California cities leading the way, forming successful public-private partnerships, how to budget for a stormwater program, statewide perspective on drought and lessons learned, veterans' benefits and enormous value to veterans and their communities, and sustainable development, the pathway to economic reliance and prosperity.
And I know I was in a couple of those rooms, so I guess we sat at opposite sides each time. And I know Councilmember Mueller and Town Manager were also there. We also had a very interesting review of our relationship with Rancho Cucamonga.
Oh, yes.
And the all the data processing they're doing about mapping the whole, I mean, every tree, every sign, everything that we have in town. And they have some very creative and very technologically innovative uses that I think we're going to be presenting some options down the road that may either be a part of the 50th anniversary celebrations next year or even precede that if things come together. But very, very cool technology that we can put some of that data that they've collected to good use.
Can I add?
Yeah, Councilmember Mueller.
Just one comment, because I do think this is an important issue to kind of bring up to everybody. The one resolution that we did have that was passed was really to help our neighbors to the north in the Redwood Empire division of the league. And what's going on up there, that is, and none of us will be surprised to hear that's all where all the marijuana is being growing up in Mendocino and Humboldt County. And there's just a lot of devastation going on up there in terms of the environment, in terms of all this illegal growth going on. And, you know, they even killed the mayor of one of those towns up there a couple years ago. So we felt it was important to put a resolution in place. We really need a summit to get all the key stakeholders in place because everybody, but there's all the medical marijuana clinics that have been approved in California, the state of Washington, the state of Colorado, but nobody is approving where we can grow this stuff legally. So it's 90% of all that marijuana is coming out of the Redwood Empire illegally and really devastating that up there. So we're going to put together a summit and try to figure out where we're going to start legally allowing growth of marijuana to occur in the state. I already told them I'm not taking out any Cabernet vines, so.
All right. Any other meeting reports? I did want to first acknowledge, I'll ask Samantha if she wants to kick in about our upcoming Downfield Days.
Can I talk about the wellness fair first?
You can talk about the wellness fair, you can talk about concert in the park, you can
Yes.
talk about movie night and
So we have
Downfield
movie
Days.
night this Friday. It is The Incredibles at Yountville Community Park, and we'll have food again by Smokey's Old School Barbecue, 6 o'clock. Movie will start at dusk. Saturday is our wellness fair. It's our 5th annual. We'll once again be providing the free flu shots as well as free health checks like blood pressure, glucose, and there's also some sort of interesting algorithm to tell you how your health, what your health age is, as well as a bunch of other booths, including Napa County Health and Human Services, the DA's office, lots of different things. It's also Kiwanis Kids Day, so in the gym, Mr. Hall over there is in charge of that. We have games and prizes and healthy snacks, all free for kids, so hopefully they all come down. And then Sunday we have our final music in the park from 3 to 5 at Veterans Memorial Park. And then coming up in a couple short weekends is Yountville Days. So October 3rd is Friday. It's the movie night, the Lego movie. I think it's going to be a pretty big deal because,
Awesome.
you know, Frozen was our biggest movie night in the history of movie nights. We had well over 600 people in our park. And so The Incredibles on Friday night. We are taking a year off from the chili cook-off. You'll read more about that hopefully in tomorrow's Sun to kind of regroup. It's meant to be a fundraiser. We've had a really hard time getting teams because it's crush and businesses can't afford to let their people go. So we're going to regroup and come back next summer, probably in June or July with something similar. And then Sunday is the Downfield Days Parade and Festival. Big changes coming to that, all having to mostly do with public safety and the impact on our highway highway. We have changed the route of the parade. It will go straight up Washington Street from Veterans Park to Yountville Community Park. We have been working with the Veterans Home for probably about 6 months on how to mitigate the few people who have been coming out in the past to watch the parade. So we're providing a VIP viewing area at the community center where they'll have shade and restrooms and free transportation and water and people there to make them feel like VIPs. So we're working on that. And then the festival will kick off at 11. Very similar to years past. Fantastic music and food by all of our nonprofits, beer and wine, and a free kids area there as well. So hopefully it'll be a fantastic weekend.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I heard it.
Yeah.
The Wellness Fair, 9 to
The Wellness
noon.
Fair is 9 to noon on September 20th, this coming Saturday.
And flu shots as long as they last.
Yeah.
From the
We've
county.
never run out, so
That's
come
always
on
been
down.
a big.
Oh,
big
we're also
draw.
doing a free medication turn-in. Napa County Sheriff's Department's doing that, which I think is really important because people should not throw their medications in the trash, right, Margie? Nor should they throw their needles, they should also not put them down the toilet. So this is a great way of disposing your medication without having to go hunt down where you can actually do that legally. So bring it on down. We got a big box.
Great, thank you. The last thing I wanted to acknowledge on behalf of the whole council, and since we did have a significant earthquake, and I wanted to recognize all the staff that worked through that very diligently, even when homes were in disarray and needed attention. You know, our staff deserves a lot of credit for supporting the residents here and the businesses here in Yountville. I know that we also sent equipment and personnel down to downtown Napa to help out down there for a number of days. So I want to say thanks to all the public works crew that went out of their way to help there. Really a pretty devastating experience. Yountville, very fortunate, even more fortunate, like I said at the very beginning of tonight's meeting, that this council and our staff took the initiative to finally make this building safe. And we know it survives a 6.0 within 10 miles with literally no crack and barely any papers off desks. So that was a test we didn't need to have, but we're glad to have passed it very well. And the effort is still needed. I'll now that I just remembered, there is not only an official relief fund through the Napa Valley Vintners and the Community Foundation, but there is going to be not a free concert, but a low-cost concert down at the Napa Fair and Expo, sponsored by Latitude 38 of Bottle Rock on Sunday the 28th from, I believe, 11 to 4 or 5, something like that. They're also coordinating a winemaker dinner at the Napa Valley Marriott on Thursday night, the 25th, and they're encouraging people to participate downtown Napa for the farmers market on Saturday, as well as there's something Friday night, and I'm not remembering what it is, but just to support local businesses downtown Napa. So just to acknowledge all of the effort that went into getting us back on our feet and helping out our neighbors. We could all tell stories about how we saw neighbors helping neighbors and business owners helping their neighbors that needed help cleaning up, and certainly the vice mayor.
I can tell one story that's not.
I'm not sure that we should have, this is not the proper forum for that.
All right.
You told everyone in the national news for a week about that situation, so I think everybody knows. Councilmember Hall, one last thing.
I would like to invite and hopefully remind everyone out there that on October the 11th at the Heritage Room at the Community Center, we will be having our annual Texas Hold'em tournament. Tickets are $50, or buy-ins are $50 a piece, and I expect everyone who's viewing us now to be there. Thank you.
That might be true.
Yeah.
Is there a need for closed session tonight? No, sir, not tonight. Since we earlier tonight approved cancellation of our October 7th meeting, we are going to adjourn to our next regular meeting, which is Tuesday, October 21st at 6 p.m. Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Thank
Second.
you. The
All in
Dornbecker
favor?
Hall
Aye.
combination again. Unanimously approved, I'm sure.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Can we come by like at 3?